Peter, that's hysterical that you have a desk chair sitting in front of the Board of Education.
Just picture me in Starbucks.
That's amazing.
It's not snowing.
How do you know? Have you been outside?
I have. Just saying.
It did snow a bit earlier today.
It was slating for sure, no question.
I categorically deny that that occurred because I did not see with my own eyes.
Let's see. We have Kathleen. Hang on, I'm just taking a quick
Can't
roll
hear
call
anybody
here.
right now.
All right, Kathleen, are you on?
No, I don't think I am.
I don't see Kathleen yet. I see Karen, Christina.
Here.
Joe's on. Karen Kowalski's on. I think we're waiting on Peter and
Wait a
Megan.
minute, hold on. No.
Nice mustache, Ralph.
Thank you, Peter.
Hey, Rick.
It was starting to take on a life of its own, so I got rid of it.
You were looking like Santa Claus. All right, we've
I-
got Peter, so I think we're just waiting on Megan. We'll give her another minute.
She's having trouble accessing it. She just texted, so.
All right, let's give her one moment then.
Oh, shoot, that's what was this one.
Hey, Christina, can you check and see if she's having any luck?
I just showed her when the email, she was looking for the email with the link to the meeting, so.
Gotcha. Thank you. All right, why don't we get started and she will join us in progress. So I'm going to go ahead and call the meeting to order. And Michael, if we could have the flag for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance. Michael, do we have the flag? All right, if we don't have the flag, no worries. I've got one right here. Here we go. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible. Sorry, for justice for all. It's been a long day, folks. All right. Thank God we have the flag nearby, though. Thank you for joining what is now our third virtual Board of Education meeting. I see we've got about 56 attendees as well as the panelists. Thank you all for joining. We are still not within the top 10 shows watched on Netflix. It's very disappointing. This meeting is being conducted pursuant to the Governor's Executive Order 7 for virtual meetings. How fun. We're recording the meetings. It'll appear on the webpage as well as our YouTube channel. Before I start, let's go through the ground rules as always. The agenda for the meeting is on our Board Docs website. You can get there from greenwichschools.org, click on the Board of Education, scroll down and click on the blue meetings box. That'll actually take you into Board Docs and you just click on tonight's date. This is a special meeting and as such, we're not taking public comments. Of course, members of the community can email the entire board by sending a single email to boardofedmembers@greenwich.k12.ct.us. Now the meeting tonight is actually a discussion. This consists of discussion and some possible votes by the superintendent, the board members, the cabinet, and some external consultants. I'd ask that the participants state their name when they talk. I'll call on you. We're using the raise the hand function, especially for board discussion. If you could do that, I'll call on you in the order I'd see them. I'd ask you to please stay on mute when you're not talking. Ask that board members try to keep things short and succinct and concise as well as they can. And then for all voting, of course, we'll be doing roll call voting just for the sake of the record. With that, can we get a motion to approve the meeting agenda?
I will make the motion to
Ms.
approve the
Downey.
meeting agenda.
Okay, I think Ms. Hirsch made the motion. Ms. Downey saw a hand, so we'll
I'll
call that a second. Any discussion? We can change it because it's a special meeting. So all in favor of the meeting agenda, Peter Bernstein's a yes. Ms. Stowe?
Yes.
Ms. Hirsch?
Yes.
Ms. Downey?
Yes.
Mr. Kelly?
Yes.
Ms. Kowalski?
Yes.
Ms. Olson? Who I think is on
Sorry,
mute.
yes, yes.
And Mr. Scher.
Yes.
Thank you. All right, so our next order of business is the consent agenda. I'll make a motion that we accept the consent agenda. Is there a second?
Second.
Ms. Downey, thank you. All right, any discussion? Hearing none. We'll do a roll call vote for accepting the consent agenda. I'm a yes. Ms. Stowe?
Yes.
Ms. Hirsch?
Yes.
Ms. Downey?
Yes.
Kelly?
Yes.
Ms. Kowalski?
Yes.
Ms. Olson?
Yes.
And Mr. Scher.
I'm an abstain. I didn't read it.
Okay, so that passes 701. Thank you. The next item on our agenda is the superintendent update. Take it away, Dr. Jones.
All right, thank you, Mr. Bernstein. I just have a couple of items tonight. First of all, just where we are in the budget process, I think it took a little bit of a different turn today. There was, the public hearing was earlier this week with BET. So we listened, I did log in, listen to most of the comments on that meeting, and a lot of support for the board budget from our community. So thank you for those people that actually did submit, because I know it's a little harder being virtual. Today there was a BET, their workshop, where they actually talk about the budget, and what we're looking at right now, they'll be voting on Monday, was a low reduction of about $700,000 to the high reduction that was being discussed of $3 million to the budget. Now, keep in mind, on top of that, we already know we have a gap of about 1.5 million in special education next year. So those numbers are really, they're scary numbers for us. As I today was going back through the budget again, just, you know, we go literally line by line, and we are very, very frugal in what we're doing. And as I look at our budget, you know, instructional services and supplies was less, we didn't take an increase, we reduced slightly. Administrative services, we reduced slightly. Our facilities, we increased by $27,000, which would not go a long way of, you know, helping with something like a $3 million or $2 million deficit. So we don't control the transportation, and this also doesn't really even consider, we don't know what expenses COVID is going to have in the fall. And we, you know, to reopen our buildings from disinfecting and everything else that may be required, those expenses aren't even in this budget. So it's a little bit scary. You know, I didn't expect it. I will say that it was a little bit of a shock. So it's really, our staff salary is where we have increased it. We're a people business. So I would just share that. Along with that, we have the distance learning, of course, we're in week number 6 as we're finishing up. And we're making adjustments all of the time in there. Going forward next week, we are setting either office hours, small tutorials, where it's not optional, because we feel like people should be at the point now they're ready. They're doing either like 2 30-minute segments. They can do 15 minutes each day. Some of our teachers are doing the morning meetings with the little ones to kick the day off, help them understand how to, you know, how to follow the template without their parents to help. And some of our high school prefer to do more small tutorials for things like mathematics with their students. Depends on their content area and what students are needing for office hours. But we're starting that next week. And then we also have, we've done a lot with our culture and climate, which I'll let the board know at our last meeting. And you've probably seen a lot of that. There was some of it actually in the digital digest tonight, where the schools are working really hard to try to do whole school activities, whether that's lunch bunch times where kids are coming together for lunches and principals are running those, whether that's athletics. We've had art shows where the students are actually sharing all of their artwork. They're trying to keep as much normalcy as possible for a lot of those events that the kids would normally participate in. So I just am so impressed with the way staff are really stepping up and they're really trying to contribute. I saw one of the assistant principals today who had done his video to share with the whole school for mindfulness, to follow along with him on a mindfulness activity. So I feel like we're really doing well. Most of our teachers are using video and they're using the resources and the tools. And I'm excited where we are, and we're going to keep growing. I have two feel-good things. One of them is our JC teacher, Leanne Hinkle, was named Outstanding Art Educator of the Year. So kudos to her. We just got that news. We also have named our distinguished teachers. And Megan, I don't know, I was going to invite you because I know you wanted to share who they were since you were on that committee.
I would. Is that okay to pop in right now? So I know that Sasha's, sending out the press release. They've all been contacted. It's very exciting. And thank you to Patricia Carey, because to put this together and vote anonymously and do all this and settle tie breaks and everything without being in person is no small feat. So they've all been notified already, but we have Lori Mulligan, a mathematics teacher at Greenwich High School, Jessica Keller, social studies and history teacher at Greenwich High School, Erin Montague, guidance counselor at Western Middle School, Dace Ashcraft from Advanced Learning Program at North Mianna School, Colleen Drum, language arts at Western Middle School, and Barbara Bartlett for health at Eastern Middle School. So we had a lot of people recognize. I mean, we had many names come in. I'm sure we'll have many more next year. And everyone that was nominated is distinguished, but we wanted to recognize those 6 names out loud. And we're going to find alternate ways to honor those people based on the fact that we're right now in this distance learning situation. So thank you.
Thanks, Megan. And that's all I have, Mr. Bernstein.
Great, thank you. Did any board members have questions for? You could use the raise the hand function.
Yeah, I don't know how to do that. Where is that?
If you click on participants, Peter, to the bottom right of your screen, if you're on a laptop. Okay, I've got Christina. And then Peter, if you want to raise your hand.
Tony, thank you for the information. And I don't know if you have this just because this is all developed so quickly. In terms of those kind of reductions to our operating expenses, have you and Sean, I'm guessing, had an opportunity to analyze the impact of if, or to the extent, obviously it's a very large range, the low end, the high end, or certainly at the high end, what the impact of those cuts would be in terms of staff cutting or class size, or and you may not have had that, and you may just have to do that quickly over the weekend. I don't know. I just wanted to give you an opportunity to details that you might have.
Yeah, I mean, at a very high level, obviously, we were just watching the whole meeting this morning. So, but certainly, I think it was on our mind all afternoon because it is such a big number. If you think of 3 million, you're talking about 30 staff. And regardless of when I say 30 staff, because unless you're going to go in and we're going to not do maintenance, which, that's not possible, we have to maintain the things that are in there because we didn't increase those areas of the budget. What it's looking at programs, it is looking at class size. It's big, those big issues that people don't want to grapple with because they're not great for the system. It was very difficult to bring a 2% budget, and we did it. But we did it by, right now, if you walk around this office, there are empty offices because we've frozen. We don't have an assistant food service director anymore. We don't have an assistant right now in our HR department. I mean, we have Dr. Carabillo and I share an assistant to help us. And, there's empty desks and stuff that we've been doing all year long. So we're already in a really tight spot. So the impact, if it's a number of that magnitude, because again, I'll use the big number of 3 million, it's really between 4.5 to 5, because we have to close the whole of special ed. So it's an enormous number. I don't know, I hope that gave you enough, but. It's a lot of staff
No,
salary.
no, no, no. It's not. I think
Yeah.
like when you say 30 staff, I mean, right, that's, that's a real number of people. And I think, people need to know that, right? And that, as you said, and that doesn't even include the special ed part, which we'd still be short on. So it's not, but thank you. I know it was a last minute thing that you had not planned to be focusing on. So thanks.
Yeah, that's for sure.
All right, Peter?
Sean, do you know,
Well, Peter, can you direct it to Tony since this is the superintendent's update?
Tony, can I ask you a question that Sean is going to answer?
Sure.
Well, let's not be silly here. The year to year in the proposed budget, the year to year increase in the salary accounts, total number is how much?
Actually, I
It's
can,
in, the-
yeah.
go ahead,
it's
Tony.
in front of me because we were analyzing today. It's 2.807. That's all bargaining units.
So it's the salary accounts are increasing in the current budget 2.8 million, right?
It's 1.72% of the total budget that's in the actual budget book.
Okay, and when you say that we have a hole in special education, can you quote the numbers? What?
Well, as you know, we've been talking about having the interim for this current year because our special education outplacement is in the red. And so we know the budget was built so early for next year, that hole already exists going into next year because of the number that is plugged in for outplacement and settlement number.
Okay, I'd love to see more detail on that, Tony, because I understood that those were for settlements, that it's funding settlement. We need to figure out how much of that is funding settlements already made, not anticipating new settlements we might have to make.
Right. This is the real number that we're talking about right now. And quite frankly, you bring up a very good point. When you're sitting at what we believe is 1.5, you're very correct. If we have more next year, that number could do the same thing that it did this year and continue to increase.
Yeah, I guess I'm saying because it's not really 1.5, right? It's really, what is it? That's a 5 million that's going up to 6.5 or something. That 1.5 you're talking about is a major overage to the budget. So that, I guess and part of that got funded, that happened because we had new settlements that were made on top of ones we already had.
So
Some of those settlements that we already have should be dropping off. So there's some puts and takes here. I'd like to understand what the total puts and takes are.
Yeah.
And what the assumptions are that are behind that budget number.
Yeah, I mean, I think that Sean and I work on that all the time, but it is a number that changes every month. And we can have one student move in September who has a cost of $400,000, and it has a really big impact to that number.
I think the board understands that. I guess the question is not, I don't want to debate what it is. I'm hoping someone can put down on a piece of paper, breaking that down, consistent with how it was broken down to us in the executive session. I don't want that level of detail, but in buckets, I would hope to get that detail so that, we could all appropriately advocate for the budget. Without this kind of information, it's really hard to know as a board member, what we're actually talking about.
Okay.
And my other question was, Tony, was on your at-home learning. Is there, and I didn't find it in my email, but I could have easily missed it because I've been bad about going in email. Is there specific written guidance to principals on how they're supposed to be doing instruction now? Like, as an example, how and what they should use in terms of recording content, how and what they should do in terms of group lessons with technology, there must be specific written guidance from the superintendent or from Ann Carabillo in charge of instruction to the staff about exactly how what they're supposed to be doing, yes?
There are written, yes, we have a lot of written documents, a lot of Q&A, FAQs. We have guidance for even how to get on the different platforms. There's a tremendous amount. We are in the process right now for quarter 4, updating that whole thing, just as we also have this kind of, this push for even more personal contact.
Yeah.
So that right now.
Send us what, can you send me, I mean, I don't know if any other board members interested in it, what
Yep.
the current written guidance is, not what you're about to change it to until you've changed it.
Well,
But
right.
can you send me what you've already sent out? What is the most current that's already been sent out?
Yeah, what I would like to encourage you to do first is to go to the website and go and look at everything that's on the website, because most of it is on there. When we send documents out, the very first plan is actually on the Connecticut State Department of Education site, because we were one of the model plans, but we've passed that so much now that we are updating, and we really were sending out more information each week as we added platforms, as we teachers ask for new things. Most of it is on the website, and it's very robust. And the newer document will be ready probably, I don't know, within the next day or two. I had a meeting with GEA Executive Board today, which I really wanted to have a good conversation with them before we put anything else out.
So you're suggesting I go look at the public website? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I think if you look at our website, you'll see there's a ton of information on there. There's examples for distance learning, actual where teachers have been willing to post their lessons. Like, I couldn't send all of that to you. We have the platforms are all listed. There's a sheet you can click on, and it has every platform that's available to teachers, the on-demand PD sessions that teachers can go and do. It's all on there. It's not, we didn't just send our teachers 15 pages of instructions that probably they were so overwhelmed they wouldn't have read anyway. We've tried to really build as we go and give them really good resources. Like, here are the tutorials. If you don't know how to use Edpuzzle, click on here and you can watch the video to learn. If you don't know how to use a feature in Google Classroom that you're wanting. So there's all of that is part of our plan, and it's all on the web. That's why for us to actually go and start pulling everything off the web and sending it.
No, I'm not asking for that, Tony. I'm asking for if you sent the principals any guidance that you said, look, you've gone from a position of teaching students in a classroom, X number per time, supplemented by special staff. The special staff with ALP or with reading specialists or interventions are supposed to be that. As we went to distance learning, right, I presume you as the superintendent sent standards, instructional standards to building principals so that they would implement those in their buildings. I get the whole part of all the tools and the support and all the rest of that part. That isn't what I'm asking about.
Yeah, no.
I'm interested to understand what guidance you or Ann Carabillo sent to the principals. If it's written down somewhere and it's on that website, I just wouldn't be surprised if your internal memo to them is actually out on the website. But
well, actually, with the principals, we do a lot of conference calls where we're literally all on the same call together. We're going through all of their questions that they have that are attributed either to their level or to a specific content area. So it's an ongoing every day. So, we didn't come out the second week and say, you have to do X, Y, Z. We came out and gave lots of boundaries, but we also allowed teachers to have time to learn the tools and to be able to grow. And that's why some of our districts that are next to us did come out in week 1 and they had to back off because the teachers couldn't do it. This is new for everybody, and we have really been taking steps every week to get better and better. And I think it's paid off for us because our staff are just growing leaps and bounds. And some of the, just the videos that I saw yesterday that our elementary teachers were doing, they're really working hard to grow. So again, look at the website. When the new document is ready, we will send that to the board so you can see kind of what's in it. And then I'll see if I can grab our initial one, which was by grade levels, which was on the state website.
Ms. Stowe?
Hi. Do you mind if I hit like all sort of 3 topics that were raised by the
Yep.
superintendent's update? So first of all, distinguished teachers, that's awesome. I'm happy that we were able to still do that. I didn't know any of them this year, but happy to maybe hopefully get to know them and hopefully celebrate them at one point in you know, live rather than on Zoom. So that would be nice. 2, the budget. Yeah, that's a little bit, that's a lot. I get it. It's a little bit, it's obviously a scary time, health-wise firstly, but then financially, yeah, a lot of things have changed for a lot of people. So I understand that our town government wanted to be responsive in some ways. At the same time, those sort of numbers are pretty draconian. And to me, I think that this was the question you were posing to Sean is, you know, if we could understand what that would mean. So does that mean, you know, it's X number of teachers, which if we get rid of that many teachers, that means our class size goes to X. And is that something the community needs to understand, I think, or are you getting rid of programs, right? And, you know, people always just say like music and art, or, right? You know, it's because I have a feeling that at those numbers, you're kind of have to do something huge like that. It's not just cutting 1 or 2 people or a few senior people here or there, or, you know, getting rid of a few software items. So I appreciate that we have to do something, and I do think that we have to, and I know we've done a lot so far, but I still think we need to look at our P&L a little bit more. But that level is a little scary. So that's that. Distance learning though, back to the actual academics. So I hear you. We are definitely getting better each week. And here we are in week 6, and you know, we don't know how long we're going to be closed, but let's assume it's going to be through the end of the year. So we need to get better each week, right? And I mean, I'm seeing it personally. I'm seeing it. I'm talking to friends and just everyone in the community. One of the things I guess that as I see people getting better, then I hear all the good stories. I start to hear some other stories, right? Of course, you have to. And for those that aren't getting there yet, the teachers that aren't getting there yet, I guess what's the game plan? Because I'm trying to respond to, you know, to constituents, and I'll say, you know, talk to the principal, right? I mean, is that the right approach? And then the principal, if it doesn't get answered by the principal is going to escalate it to you. Like, what should we be telling people so that if they're not getting what they want and they deserve, that they get the answers they should?
Yeah, they really need to let the principal know, because the first thing that, you know, if we hear from a parent, we do follow up with the principal, headmaster, and then we want to do, number 1, a wellness check. Is something going on with the teacher where either somebody's sick or somebody's unhealthy or they're unhealthy and we just don't know about it? Because, you know, the interesting thing about coronavirus is that people can have it and they don't want anybody to know, because it's like, you know, they're afraid, I think, people aren't going to want to be around them. So they're not necessarily telling us if they're not well. So just trying to make sure the teacher is okay. Then the second level of that is, are they not, they're fine physically or healthy, but they just they're not asking for help on the digital aspect of it. And our principals have really been doing a good job of pairing them up with buddies, teaming them up with people. We have principals that are literally, you know, doing the meets with the teachers to help that whole professional development side. And we will mobilize staff in any way that we need to help those teachers that are struggling. But, you know, it's not really any different than when you have, you know, live teaching. I mean, every day, and our buildings are open. With the number of staff that we have, there's always somebody that there's either something in their personal life that maybe their teaching's not going as well, or, you know, it's a new curriculum and they're trying to grasp that. And distance learning is definitely new, not just in every way, shape, or form. So a teacher who is a real rock star in the classroom could really be struggling with digital. It's just what we're doing now is really different. So if they talk to the principal, that's where they need to really start. And we want to, and if we know about it, we will get in there and give them the resources and help them. And if it means buddying them up with another teacher, that's what we're doing.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, Ms. Hirsch?
I did want to also start with something really positive, and I'm thrilled to have really know two of the distinguished teachers well, because they're my students' teachers. So congratulations to all of them. It's really a great honor, and I'm sorry that we're not going to be able to have the ceremony that we usually do at this time. Hopefully, we'll be able to do that soon. And I'll go in the same order everybody else has in regards to budget. I was on the BET, listening to the BET public comments earlier this week, and then again this morning. And I too have some concerns, and I know, I think it's exceptionally important, especially since these are large numbers that we're talking about of reductions to our operating budget, not just our capital budget, which we haven't even discussed here as to some of those cuts that they were looking at. And I do think that it's very little time between their discussion today and when they're actually voting on this on Monday. And I really would love to hear, even if it's not today, sometime between now and then, before that, what this could possibly mean. Because I think it's really important for the BET to understand how this can negatively impact our students' education going forward. It's not just in regards to budget. This is 9,000 students and their entire future that we're talking about here. And it's not just for a year. These have long-lasting impacts. And I don't know if you've heard from any real estate agents, because I know there's been a large influx of people that are interested in moving into Greenwich. So our numbers of students may actually increase next year, which would mean this budget reduction could be impacting us in even larger fashion. So I just didn't know if you had gotten any information from real estate agents.
No, I haven't, but I can certainly follow up with a couple of them and just see what their thoughts are. We were supposed to be in our realtors meeting and it was canceled. So maybe we want to do that virtual. So
yeah, I just know I've heard from a lot of them that there's a lot of influx of people here looking to rent for long-term rentals and looking to buy to move out of the city. So that could impact us even further. And as for distance learning, I just sort of wanted to echo a little bit of what Mr. Scher had said, and I think just from listening to him when he was asking about if there was a guidance or guidelines. I know you said you hadn't necessarily you have stuff written or things that were given to principals, but I think it might be helpful for both parents and educators if there was a little bit of that guidance shared on our website or to parents so that they know what the minimum and maximum of certain things might be. That way, I think it'll take a little less pressure off our educators, some of them who are feeling that they're not putting in enough, even though they're working their tails off. And I think it'd also be helpful for parents to understand, well, this is within the range of what our educators are supposed to be providing to our students, so that they're not comparing teacher to teacher, classroom to classroom. But I still do think that we need to make sure that there is something, an equitable educational policy for them. So as to what they're doing.
Yeah, even with, I might say the elementary template is used across the district. Now so it's the same for every elementary teacher, but they are slowly even migrating with that, in that some of the teachers that are using, for instance, like Seesaw, are actually putting that content inside there. But, and that's been in existence since week 1. We did change it. I believe it was like week 3 or 4, just because we were listening to parents and what was working, what wasn't, to make it a little bit more flexible. Sorry, go ahead.
No, you first.
No, I was just going to say, I know, and I meant to say this earlier, but Peter mentioned it was Anne's responsibility. She's probably going, no, it's not. And she's not saying anything. It's Irene. It's her team of curriculum team, just so that, so we know who's actually been helping and working on it.
Yeah. I mean, I know I've seen a major increase in the things that are happening for both of my students at home. I just don't know, some parents may not necessarily see some of the things that are being offered to students that they have the option to do or not to do. I do know, and I would love to just see what feedback you've gotten on having the multiple Flex Fridays and finding a way to be able to utilize some of those, to give a little more support if students need that then, for going forward. But anyway, I just really do think that I've seen a major increase in things going forward. So, thank you for ensuring that, there's a little bit more consistency in distance learning.
Thank you. And I do recognize that that Flex Friday is controversial depending on what it looks like in your own household. I will say, from an administrative standpoint, we overwhelmingly believe it's absolutely necessary. Our teachers are using, I see Ralph shaking his head there. I see our teachers are using, it's not a day off. And I think that's one thing to really clarify. Flex Friday is really, it means we're not posting brand new content. So, which is really more like what it looks like in a classroom. You know, you have days in your classroom where you're reviewing with students, you're doing check-ins, and by consistency, by calling it on Friday, if we didn't have Flex Friday, what would happen is a teacher may not post new content on a Wednesday, and another class it might not be on a Thursday. This at least calls it out that we are posting our new learning Monday through Thursday. Friday is our check-in day, and our teachers have found it absolutely invaluable. That's when they do a lot of their meets and check-ins, like for high school office hours, small tutorials for kids that are really needing to go back over their, problems in mathematics. It's been great. And it's also when in the afternoon, they're able to have their team meetings. And, one of the greatest assets we can have is teachers learning from other teachers where, they're learning to use a new tool and they can share it. And that's been also a really great thing that's happening on Fridays. And I know I was talking to Ralph and Rick today at the high school. That's one thing they said that is happening at GHS, which is fantastic, but it's happening across the district. So, and the feedback that I get are the parents who have said, thank you so much. This is our life support by helping us manage what's happening right now in the household. So,
Well, thank you for detailing that a little bit more, making sure and to allow us to understand that Flex Fridays really are, there are things for all of our students to be able to do, and that it's a really opportunity for them to have more connection with their teachers.
Yeah, and GEA said today, and again, it's a representative group of the district, but when we also changed the elementary template to be a little more flexible, because the first couple of weeks they were trying to do like their foreign language, their PE every day. And so what some families have done now is they actually do their electives all on Fridays, and they're really focused on the literacy and numeracy Monday through Thursday. So it's given families some flexibility too.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, Miss.
Sure, thanks, Peter. So I too want to congratulate all of the teachers for their hard work, and we'll all figure out a way to toast them either together or we'll continue to toast them virtually, which has become a new spelling word in my house. So I wanted to obviously the budget is a very scary thing, and one of the things with special ed, and I know that we are in the red this year, I'd like to just understand the overage that we have already, which I think is somewhere around 1.5, whether or not we expect to continue to see that next year. Will that be numbers that we'll also have? This is going to be built into next year's budget, or is this one-time overages?
No, we know next year's budget is short. Next year's number was the same number that we have right now, but I know, Mr. O'Keefe, you feel free to chime in. You're working on trying to get that analysis aspect.
Yeah, as far as this year, the full year exposure to the budget, and we've already resolved 400,000 of it, which brings us to the 1.1 that was part of that interim request that was approved on March 26th. With regard to that, we're making progress. We're in negotiations with the bus company, and I do believe we will see some significant savings. I don't want to get into any details yet. It's a little preliminary, but I do think we're making a lot of headway, which could ultimately mean, not having to go for the interim at all. But that's preliminary. As far as next year goes, when you look at the exposure that's driving this year's budget, part of it is that the 5.4 budget that was established in 2018, at the point that was established, we didn't know that we were going to overrun the previous year's budget by, I think it was like 600,000. So by definition, we started the year in a hole. Then on top of that, then we have some additional students requiring outplacement. So combination of things put us where we are today. And when you look at for next year, we start with who do we have, which students are outplaced this year, which of them will continue to be outplaced next year, which students will be leaving the district or graduating or going back inside, and that will reduce the number. And then, of course, we've got to look at the last 3 years trend or so to see what we can expect. And that's really a big question mark. What can we expect to see in terms of new students coming in requiring outplacements? So right now, my estimate for next year is at least $1.5 million exposure to what was budgeted for 2021. So that's our budget is flat year to year at 5.4. Right now, I'm looking at least 1.5 higher than that.
Okay.
So when we go back to the budget that Tony touched on earlier, when we look at a difference from one version of a $700,000 net reduction and another version that's $3 million, our 2% budget that we submitted is a $3 million increase. So if we got a reduction of $3 million, that brings it to flat year to year, 0% budget. And then when you factor in that we're already in the hole for $1.5 million, that represents another 0.9%. So in reality, it's a 2.9 cut percent.
Yeah, there's some big numbers. Okay.
So it's a big,
Look,
it's a big hole.
Agreed.
Really big numbers.
Big numbers. I'd appreciate, obviously you're still digging into this and like to understand what we'll be able to cut and how we're going to overcome it. So I think this is just an ongoing discussion. With respect to the topic of the hour, distance learning, I'm just, I'm hearing, multiple things. Tony, I know you and I have exchanged a series of emails over the course of the week, and I have been pressing those in town to kind of get a better understanding of their views. And overall, I think I'll need to take a look at further the guidance, but my general understanding is that there are some teachers that are frustrated, and maybe it's an overwhelming amount of guidance. Like they'd like to do more, but they don't know how to do it. Whether it's set up a Google Meets or get on Zoom and arrange time to talk with their classes. Are those types of materials out there for the teachers if they want to engage with their students on a Google Meets or a Zoom platform to be able to have those conversations, to set that up if they don't already know how to do that?
Yeah, it is. There's actually the Zoom and the Google Meets is probably the easier one because the directions they were actually sent out to all the teachers, even just separately. But there's also the on-demand tutorials that there are all sorts of different tutorials that they can take depending on what they want to learn. Then the next piece to that is the PLCs and getting the teachers either by their content area or grade level teachers that are also meeting and sharing online together as well. I will say, as we were meeting with DEA, today, that they talk about how hard this is for teachers. I know Megan mentioned this before, but it's a really, really difficult thing to do pace-wise. And so learning new tools, it takes time, but because they have to plan what they're going to teach first, then they have to create the lesson itself. If you're trying to learn a new tool, you have to figure out at what point are you going to do that. And again, that's where our Fridays, also in the afternoons, the team's coming together, it's critical.
So on that note, are there points of contacts? Like sometimes just the information is overwhelming. And I know, working for a big corporation, when I have an IT problem, there's all of these resources that I can go to online that says, okay, here's your step-by-step on how to do it. And sometimes that doesn't solve the problem. And you really just need to talk to another human being. Do the teachers have points of contact to ask questions that can get on the phone with them and say, just walk me through this? Do they have that support?
They do. They have tech support in all of their buildings. There's also a portal and portal support. And we have about 20 different people who are actually kind of manning that support line. And I will say that's one thing that's been amazing to me during this process is I have not had, other than like Schoology slowing down or something like that, I have had no complaints about technology not working, any of that, which is pretty unusual, especially if you look around kind of a lot of other school districts, you won't find that. And it's because we have so much support. Now, I will say the teachers have, definitely communicated that the volume of email right now, and I'm sure parents are feeling it too, because we've heard that from parents, the volume of email is so high and overwhelming that I think sometimes it's just being able to sit down and try to remember where that resource was. And, I have to say from a superintendent level, I'm not normally on all these Zoom and Google Meets meetings. And I mean, the first week, I was driving me crazy just trying to figure out where the links were to join the right meeting at the right time. And then Ann Carabillo helped me with that. So she fixed that problem for me. But, seriously, I think they're on email overload. And so the resources are all there and we keep putting them out there. The best thing though is when the support from their colleagues in their building, because they trust each other and, it's teacher to teacher. And we're really trying to encourage that. And there's so much of that going on. It's been great.
Yeah, good. So another point that I've also noticed, I think that there was some directive that was given to suggest that, on this whole concept of email overload and, parents were adjusting just as much as students were adjusting to the concept of e-learning, that, when kids weren't turning in necessarily all of their assignments, to back off a little bit and give a little bit of space. I don't necessarily disagree with that, but I would say also that I think that there has been too much back off, or I think I would suggest that either principals or teachers send out an email that said, giving more status updates of how their kids are doing on a regular basis, just so that, if a parent isn't hearing something about their child, it isn't because everything is good. If there is something that needs to be said, I think more reminders need to start coming out. And if a parent doesn't want to read the emails, I'd say don't read the emails, because I think what's happening here, and I can speak from personal experience and then from others that I've heard from, is they had no idea that their kid wasn't turning in some of the assignments, and then all of a sudden, a month into this said, hey, is everything okay? I haven't heard, so-and-so hasn't turned in an assignment in a couple of weeks. And they're like, what are you talking about? So I think it's time to, we've had 6 weeks now. I think it's time that we need to start seeing some more emails and some more check-ins from a teacher to a parent to say, here's the current status, because there may be some situations where parents are not aware that their kids are not as in tune as they should be in this day and age. And I think it'd be helpful to make sure everybody stays on track.
Yeah, I would really reinforce, it kind of goes back to the question Kathleen asked, if a parent's experiencing that, you really need to reach out to the principal, because I know like even at the high school, they are really staying on top of kids who aren't logging in. They have their assistant deans that are reaching out, making calls. If we need to kick it over to counselors for even a deeper level, and it's probably easier in elementary because they've got the template, but we're calling families personally and really trying to make sure those wellness checks on kids. That's probably one of the most important things we're doing right now is making sure if a student is only logging on, let's say it's a high school student, it happened to be every second or third day, maybe that's because the counselor had a conversation with the family. The high school student is having to babysit the 4 siblings, Monday, Wednesday when the parents at work. It's making sure we understand those situations. And they're really making an effort to do that. As a matter of fact, we were talking about that in our GEA executive meeting today. So if a parent is experiencing that, please tell them to reach out to the principal.
Okay, good. And then my last point is on the guidance that's gone out. And I don't know if this is the current guidance in place, but this seemed to have been the guidance that had been sent out to at least, I think, some of the teachers that said, at this time, and this is the guidance, it says, at this time, Greenwich Public Schools will not be providing live streaming instruction nor can they engage in a lesson, a live lesson, and record it to be shared. The teachers can, at their discretion, do small group check-ins, office hours, SEL type activities, and help sessions. The teachers can also, at their discretion, embed pre-recorded videos of instructions of themselves, a teammate, or other online sources of learning. And then at this point, it says our teachers are starting to move in the direction of incorporating more personal check-ins with calls this week, video sessions beginning next. They are also embedding pre-recorded lessons from online sources that may start to record themselves. So I'm wondering, this kind of sets the bar, in my opinion, really low as to what our teachers are expected to do or can do, and have been told not to do certain things. Is this going to be changing in weeks going forward? And is this particular guidance being modified in weeks going ahead?
I think we've been modifying as we've gone all along. So if you go back like to the very first week, when people were getting Zoom bombed and that was really happening across the country, we were not prepared to have our children and our staff, and any of you that have been on one of those in the last couple of weeks know, we did not want, and that I will own that. I did not want us to have classrooms of children getting Zoom bombed because the teacher doesn't know how to use the resource or the tool, because Zoom or Meets were not tools that we had really ever, we didn't have a reason to use them. We did start and make sure the guidance was there on how to use it with special education the very first week. So we have, as we've put out new information, we continue to grow, and we're going to grow again next week. I will say though, I think most of the video lessons, a lot of those are far superior to what you get on a Zoom, where it's very auditory. It's hard to have resources and tools. A teacher, when they're actually videoing their lesson, if they're in their home and they've got resources and materials, which now they have a lot more because they were able to pick some up, they can actually stop the video, they can rewatch it, they can edit, and it really is more like a flipped classroom where you're getting a true lesson. And even at elementary, some of the videos that they're just teaching, whether it's writing or foundations, have really, really been great. Far superior than what we would get through something like this, like what we're on tonight. This is a very auditory mode, and I would say a very much 1980s style of teaching. And our teachers who are doing video are actually 21st century teaching. So we want to blend. I think this has been great for more human connection in all of those aspects, small tutorials, more so than anything.
So are we going to start these small tutorials perhaps at all levels of, K through 12? Or are these small tutorials only going to be subject to certain grade levels?
We already started them. They're happening all across the district. And again, some teachers are more comfortable than others. Some are choosing to do check in they feel like their class meetings, if they're younger grades, class meetings have been more important. Some of them are handling it like office hours so that students can come online, for instance, in high school, and ask the questions about the kind of flipped content that, maybe they needed a little bit more kind of questions from the video that they watched. And a lot of the videos also have other supporting things along with them. It's like Screencastify, if you've seen a teacher. I know Peter's mentioned where you can see the teacher actually working the math problem with their hand in the screen. But a student may feel like that wasn't enough and they have questions, so they can go into the office hours for tutorials. It's happening all across the district right now. So, I mean, we have a lot of really, really great things going on.
And when is the next guidance that's going to be going out?
That'll be next week. As a matter of fact, at Western already sent something out. He jumped the gun just a little bit, but we will be sending. I email the staff every week, just like I do the community. So, and that's why I wanted to meet with GEA executive board first. And Carol Sutton, who leads their group, was mulling over, how it's worded and making sure there's clarity. And they gave us some good feedback today as well. So we'll be ready for next week.
Good. Well, I think Peter asked for this as well. I think it would be helpful from a board perspective if we could get the guidance that's going to the teachers and the principals to understand what is the directive and what is the bar that's being sent. I think you know, we need to keep increasing the bar as we go forward. And I think the bar it's time. You know, we're 6 weeks in.
Yeah, and I do want to say that our bar is very high right now. It is. And I know people want some more human connection, but you know, our teachers are working incredibly hard. And I do think if you have a teacher that you feel like there's a challenge, please reach out to the principal, because the vast majority of our staff are working much harder, they will tell you, than it is. They would rather school be open, that's for sure. Because
we all would.
Yeah, I mean, I was saying, you know, we were talking about this, and that, you know, an estimate, a 15-minute video can be a 3-hour exercise. It's not fast. It doesn't take you 15 minutes just to plan the content, record the content. Then you have to go watch yourself to make sure you didn't, you know, have a mistake in your video. Where in the classroom you'd go, oh, oops, you know, because a kid would call you on it. When you say the wrong word. So they watch the video, then that may need some edits, and then they need to maybe add an ed puzzle, you know, question, formative assessment after they watch the video. So by the time they do it, just 15 minutes can be 3 hours easy. So they are working really hard. The bar is very high. And I think the best thing we can do is continue to support our teachers and be a district that is in partnership with our teachers. That's how we'll get the most growth. Is making sure that we're supporting the growth, and we're supporting the tools, and really analyzing what are the best tools, and them knowing that we support them in their growth, because it's a steep curve, but they're working very hard and doing some wonderful things.
Thank you, Tony, for that. Peter, I've got Megan and Joe who haven't spoken yet, so I'm going to go to them and we'll circle back to you. So Ms. Olson.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Jones. First of all, I am a proponent. I am in favor of Flex Fridays. I have the teacher's perspective, and I understand and do see the fact that just the administrative work alone, you can sit there for 3 hours nonstop, just writing emails in a time that normally would be engaging with students, planning lessons. So I do agree. What Ms. Hirsch had said earlier about, I think it's important, the messaging, and it's important for the teachers and educators to have a little bit maybe more like a minimum and a maximum, you know, so that some teachers don't feel like they need to be, you know, going on doing live lessons 3 times a day, and others are, you know, something that there's some sort of criteria, like these are the expectations, and whatever they may be, office hours or Screencastify, or, you know, these are the expectations, and this is, you know, not to arrange so that they know what's expected of them, I think would be helpful for everyone, parents, teachers, educators, everyone involved. I also, just because I'm living it right now as a teacher, like I'm learning about Seesaw, Screencastify, all these other things. They might not mean much to people here, but the truth is, and things are always changing, privacy laws, oops, can't do that, now we have to do this. And it takes a lot more time, like you said, to record a lesson, and it takes doing a Zoom call like this right now, like you said, 1980s or whatever. It's just not best practice. It's every 5 to 7 minutes, students should be able to process, do a talk and turn, absorb the material, and just lecturing lecturing to a group like this, I don't think is the answer. I know, you know, maybe, like I said, if there's some sort of criteria that educators all know what's expected for them, and that's consistent across the board, I think that would be helpful for all involved, and people would understand. And maybe that's what's missing, is that the board doesn't know what those expectations are 100%, or aren't completely clear on it. But this is no joke from a teacher's perspective. Like this is night and day work. And I know I don't leave my computer, you know, and I know that there's a lot of educators that I know that in this particular district that are probably doing the same. So, and continue to have, if we can continue to have those hidden superstars, you know, there's a lot of hidden talent out there. It's teachers, they don't rise up and say, hey, I'm great, but they are, and help one another. And I don't mean to, maybe I'm overstepping or micromanaging, but, you know, just to be able to help one another, like, for instance, you know, if it's one particular like website, and 6th grade for instance, like just for instance, 6th grade French, here's the remote learning slides, right? And they're being given to all the 6th grade French teachers so that if someone in my family is sick one day or I have to do something, those are the same thing. It's kind of more disseminated for all those people. We can all contribute to those slides. So again, I'm sure I'm in the weeds. I'm sure I am, but just a resource for all of them to sort of come together so that we're not hearing as much about the inconsistencies might be a helpful idea. But I know what's going into it, and I've got kids calling on me half the time, and I'm still doing it. So I know what's going into it. So I appreciate what's going on out there.
Thank you.
All right, Mr. Kelly.
Uh-oh.
Joe, I think you're still muted.
Oh, sorry about that. I always wondered
There you
if
go.
people don't put themselves on. Okay, good. I suppose I'm okay now. Tony, thanks for the presentation. I have an observation and I have a question. The observation is, I assume the next pandemic, we will do much better than this pandemic because we didn't have a previous pandemic to structure our learning on. So basically, this is all new and we're all adjusting. That's my observation. My question is, how are we doing compared to both the private schools and the other districts within the state? Because many people are contacting me and asking, why are the private schools able to do this and we are not? Why are they able to, and they list a number of things that maybe we are or we are not doing. And two, I say that things are different to them with private schools. And oftentimes they also refer to other districts within the state that might be ahead of us. Are these just ways of them, attempts of them telling us to do better by making things up, or how are we comparing to the other districts?
Yeah, I because I am part of the superintendent's group, so we all share. We do follow what's happening in the state. We're all in the same place, pretty much. I mean, we are. I think sometimes people will look on a website and they'll see something on the website and think that something is happening all of the time in a district, and that's what I have heard, because when people have given me names of districts to look at, we've done exactly that. And we find out that a lot of them are not where we are, quite frankly, because they don't have the resources. We have a lot of apps for our teachers. We have, access for all of our kids. So some of the districts some of the districts we've been asked to compare ourselves to, we've done that. But I stay up with the region. Private schools, I can't speak as much about private schools. I think some of them are actually having kids log on to Zoom from like 9 to 10 in the morning. I don't believe that's best practice, but I haven't seen it. So, and I think it goes back to what I said before. I don't think we should be lecturing, for an hour or hour and a half, 2 hours on screen like that. I think right now we have some parents that are already worried about screen time. And, I had a parent who reached out the other day. So even part of our approach to this whole community culture building is, how can we have a science activity where we get kids out in the yard, looking for, leaves and critters and all that kind of stuff, so that they're not even on the screen all the time. So I think we actually are ahead, and I feel really good about where we are. And I think it's the eyes are in it depends on who you ask. I think some parents are really frustrated because it takes more parental involvement at elementary. It just does with the little ones. And they would love for us to have 3 hours of Zoom so that the kids would have to sit there. But I saw something on Twitter the other day that made me laugh, because there was a little kid on his Zoom session who set up all the pillows, put his pajamas on it, had his little helmet there, and they thought he was in the Zoom session, and the father realized he had been faking for 2 days, that he was even on the screen. So, and you would think that couldn't happen because he's not talking, obviously, right? But I think that's part of the frustration, is that, it's that not having the babysitter, grandparent help, all of that, and really wanting to keep their kids busy. What I would say is that learning to utilize some of the apps a little bit more effectively is really going to help us in the long run. And I think Seesaw, which we've mentioned, is one of those apps where the directions can be on the screen. And we have a lot of teachers doing this. The directions are on the screen. The teacher can actually read the directions just in audio. So a little first grader, after they've been shown it once or twice, would know, okay, I click the audio, so the parent no longer has to read the directions to a child, you know, who can't read because they don't know what to do. So it's areas like that that are going to help us continue to get better. It's working with the resources.
Well, I'm very proud of our public schools. I'm very proud of our district. So you're telling me that with confidence, I could respond to these people saying we are just as good, if not better, than the other districts in the state of Connecticut.
I do believe so, yes.
Thank you.
All right, Mr. Scher.
I guess I just wanted to comment and give feedback. I'm not looking for a debate, so I don't really want to hear a item by item debate. Here's my feedback. Parents in this district are not happy with what we're doing. And I hear it from a lot of different people, a lot of different grades. I don't go searching for this. But, you know, I'm hearing from a lot of people. Here's what they're looking for. Tony, and I'm clear now that you don't agree with this, right? Philosophically. They're looking for some kind of direct instruction for their kids. And they're not getting it. And it's very clear they're not getting it. And to the degree that they're getting it, students are not having a consistent experience in the school system. Quoting Ms. Kowalski's, you know, the guidance, I got the same note from a principal, and I'm not going to say who it is, but they quoted that exact guidance. And it says, at the teacher's discretion, when we have a school system where the child's educational experience is a random walk based upon what teacher they happen to get, and whether or not they're providing a recorded lesson or whatever and the other one's not, that can't be where we can be. And I think everybody was patient about this, to Mr. Kelly's point about a pandemic, but that can't continue. Well, maybe it will be, but I will tell you, the public and parents are not going to accept that 6 weeks in, that week 7, 8, 9, 10, and 11 until we're finished has that same answer. I've tried to raise this a couple times in prior board meetings. And, you know, I realize some of my colleagues didn't agree. Some of them seem to be coming to the same place, but I don't know. When people talk about what other people are doing, Tony, to be candid, the prevailing practice, particularly in private independent schools, but also now increasingly in public schools, is some hours of direct instruction, either small group or by class online. And to say that it's not, it's just not factually correct. Is it a full, what it used to be, hour session, so on and so forth? No, in many cases it's dramatically reduced down to 2 or 3 hours a day, but it's multi-subject. And you can just see it. The other thing is, I'm concerned that all of these briefings we have are very focused on teachers. I don't hear a lot of focus on students. I hear a lot of focus on teachers and teacher training and them not knowing how to use our tools. And we're kind of at week 6, and I'm quite surprised given that we had a 6+ year investment, over $20 million in personalized learning, technology, teacher training, all of it for years that many of the people in town aren't really familiar with. And Tony, I realize you're only here 10 months, but it's amazing to me that we would pick our heads up and we're having conversations about teachers who are not comfortable using technology after that kind of investment. And to be last point is, I'm really whipsawed in this conversation because I heard you just say, we haven't had technology issues, we don't have technology complaints. But in every other session we've had on this, the conversation has been, people don't have hotspots, they don't have Chromebooks, they can't get access to internet, teachers are taking too long to upload. So I'm getting really confused on what the narrative is, because it seems to change from meeting to meeting. As I say, I think we've talked enough about this subject. I'm not interested in a line by line. I just give this as feedback. I think it's representative of a lot of people in the community. We're going into week 7. I realize you're going to put out new guidance. You don't seem ready to share that with us yet. I hope we're finding out about it as a board before the public finds out. But, you know, I guess I'll wait to see, and I hope you take that in as input in the spirit that it's intended. And, you know, but you're running our district, and I think the board is giving you input, but it's up to you as a superintendent to take that, and, you know, you'll have to own the decisions you're making, and that's the way it'll go.
Yeah, if I could just make one comment, I'll just comment on the support. When I talk about tech support, that means if a student has a broken Chromebook, they literally are emailing tech support. We've handed out, I think we're up to almost 300 now, Chromebooks that have had broken keyboards. And the turnaround can be the same day. If the parent can get here to Havemeyer, there's, you know, 2 people, 3 people here that are really helping to do that. If a teacher can't get in, can't get logged in, we're not hearing any complaints about that. Now, does everybody have access at home to upload fast? No, and we don't control the home internet. We've also given out all of our hotspots. We had another order, just, I think it came in the end of last week, about another 27. We mobilized all of those this week. So we are solving, you know, those problems as they come up. Internet will continue, I think, to be more of a challenge as more people lose their jobs because they can't pay the bill. And really, my understanding is the companies aren't supposed to be shutting them off. So we're also trying to help with that. But when I say tech support, it's about a person says they have a problem, and we're helping them.
AT&T, Verizon, and T-Mobile are all giving it away free for students. So
Yeah.
maybe what you guys ought to do in the administrative office is go look at those programs so that you can readily refer parents to them.
Yeah, we're doing that already, but they're on the public. It's like the public domain of like Optima, for instance, which doesn't necessarily work for all the students depending on where their houses are located. But we're trying to help families with that. So when I say tech support, if somebody's having an issue, we're really trying to help families and teachers both solve it. So that's all for me.
All right, with that, I just want to touch, it's Peter Bernstein, just want to touch on a couple of items. One, distinguished teachers. Megan, thank you for sharing that tonight. My wife actually served on the committee. I was not allowed to know anything until the press release went out. So very happy for those teachers. And yes, we will honor you. And Miss Hinkle, the art teacher, my kids both had her. I can tell you personally, she works miracles with children. So because not everybody is artistic. That includes me, who can't draw with a straight line. And my brother gets paid as an artist. I shared with the board an email today, Tony, I don't think you mentioned it. The selectmen this morning voted unanimously to grant MI status to the Phase 1 of Cardinal Stadium. So I just want to thank Tony, Sean, Dan Watson, and our own Joe Kelly for helping to pull that together and make that happen. They're anxious to get Phase 2, and that's going to happen, I think, in early June. So that project keeps moving forward. On the budget discussion, Tony and I were both dialed into the BET call this morning. I've spoken to a couple of BET members since then. I guess let me stress what I've heard. It's not if we're going to have money taken out of our budget. I think it's a question of how much. And I think that is just the economic reality of the times that we're living in. The fact that people in town are being out of work. We're already seeing the tax money coming in being delayed. You know, so I know Tony and Sean are probably going to be working through the weekend trying to identify items. So, you know, the message to the community is, look, when this board passed its budget, our message was loud and clear. The cuts that we made in that budget to get to the BT budget guidelines were made in a way to do the least amount of impact on teaching and learning in the classroom. And I'm sure that that's what Tony and Sean will use as their North Star as they move forward with this. It's not going to be easy work. I know the BET had discussions amongst themselves before their workshop today. Obviously, nothing in their workshop is binding. They're still looking to us for guidance in terms of getting information from Tony and Sean. So we'll continue to work with them. I also talked to Carol Sutton today. Carol, thanks for taking the time. We talked on a bunch of stuff. One of the things that was in the last teacher contract was actually a memorandum of understanding about an early retirement program. And Carol brought me up to date on the work that that committee has been doing. And that's something that I think the BET wanted us to take a closer look at to see if there were savings. I'm not sure there really are, but it's probably a good idea for us to get that update. So Tony, I guess that's something that, if you can check in with Shemaine and maybe get an update for the board. But it is something that the work has been ongoing. You're going to have to roll your sleeves up and really look. And obviously we had prioritized our capital projects, but I think that may be reprioritized for us. So that's something where I think they also may need some input. Just to close the loop on distance learning, I personally have seen lots of videos. I've seen a lot of personalized things happening. I've seen teachers making personalized videos for kids who are struggling with certain concepts. That's not to paint the rosiest of pictures, because there's also challenges and there's always opportunity, and there has been improvement. And I think what I've heard tonight from others is we need more, and we're going to keep moving in that direction. And I think it's a good idea to just continue to do that. And we're seeing office hours. I'm not a huge fan of the Flex Fridays for my own children. I understand the need. I've heard that from others, but I've also heard the other side of it. Just trying to figure out how to find the right balance for everybody in this town is a challenge. And thank you for navigating that, Tony and team. I know you've got others on the line. And Irene, we saw the note. Congratulations on your new gig. And with that, if there's no other discussion for the superintendent, we'll move on to our first action item, which is the COVID-19 grading policy. So Ms. Stowe, I'll turn it over to you.
All right, thanks, Peter. I actually have to make a motion first. I want to make a motion under policy 9314 to suspend our own policy around an item needing to be read at a prior meeting.
I'll second. This is Karen Hirsch. I'll second that.
All right, Ms. Stowe, do you want to explain?
Yeah, because this is a little complicated. So I was looking to amend our own rules, and I don't take that lightly as chair of the policy committee, so that we can have the discussion tonight and take action if we wish tonight. So if we think we've had a healthy discussion, we got this policy right, and we want to just get it done because we have had a lot of public comment, we've had a lot of feedback, and everyone thinks it's good to go. It gives our families what they need, it gives us some comfort, it gives them direction, then great. If we don't get there, then so be it. We'll have to table it and take it into a special meeting. But I just wanted to, by doing this, I'm giving us the flexibility to vote on it tonight. So I just wanted to explain that. But I would need to, obviously, we need to do a roll call to see if that's something we can even consider.
All right, so is there discussion on the motion? Basically, if I understand correctly, Ms. Stowe, we'd be amending the need for a second read on a policy, just to put it on the table, to have the discussion, and then members could choose whether we want to take action on it tonight or not after that discussion.
Exactly,
Okay.
and it's a little complicated, just procedural, yep.
All right, any discussion on that motion? Hearing none, so it's a motion to suspend the second read for the policies. I'll take a roll call vote. I'm a yes. Ms. Stowe?
Yes.
Ms. Hirsch?
Yes.
Ms. Downey?
Yes.
Mr. Kelly?
Yes.
Ms. Kowalski?
No.
Ms. Olson?
Yes.
Mr. Scher?
No,
I'm sorry, what was that, Peter?
no, oh, I'm sorry, no.
Okay, that motion passes 6-2. All right, so Ms. Stowe, I'll recognize you.
Okay, so with that, I would like to, so I can get on the table, I need to make a motion to approve policy 6146.19 as presented.
And do we have a second for that motion?
Karen Hirsch, I'll second it.
Okay, I'll turn it back over to you, Ms. Stowe, for discussion.
Okay, I'm gonna go through some history here so I can frame the conversation. So as you know, or hopefully most people know, the Connecticut State Department of Education came out and suggested that districts in Connecticut go pass-fail for the grading. As a policy committee, that would require us changing our grading policies. So we got together, we've read a lot about what other districts are doing, but we need to do what's best for our community. We have heard from a lot of people. We try to do this and as quickly as possible because I think that it really matters to our families to have direction at this point as we're already in marking period 4. So we really worked hard over the past week, and I'm pleased to say that we actually have over 350 comments already from the public. And the majority, frankly, want to keep grades. But we also recognize that there are some who are struggling during this time. And for those, we wanted to provide flexibility. So we got together, the policy committee, we've met twice, and most importantly, we obviously our meetings were held in public. We had them on Zoom because that's what we have to do. And we did have a few of you join, thank you very much. But most importantly, we had Ralph Mayo, Rick Petrowski, and Judy Nadell join because obviously they're the ones that sort of make all this happen at the high school, I should say. And there are two things that we think about, at least I think about when I look at grades, right? There's the motivating factor, the progress check sort of aspect, and then there's the external factor. And the external factors obviously matters for the high school. And that's what we're focused on here, is the high school. And so where we ended up, and as a committee, what we voted on, so we met last Thursday. We obviously, Tony was good enough to push out the district digest that we met on Thursday, and then we got back together on Monday. We had long conversations. We looked at a lot of comparable districts. We talked to Judy a lot about what the colleges are doing, and that's why we have Judy and Ralph and Rick with us tonight, so that you can all hear about the same things that we learned. But where we ended up, and as a policy committee, we voted 3-0. To make the recommended policy that we then sent out to the community on Monday so that people would have time to comment, is a policy that's sort of a hybrid, right? So to be clear, it only applies to marking period 4. We spent most of the third marking period in school. So we felt it was really only relevant for marking period 4 that we have to provide some flexibility. The default is to keep your grades. So you wouldn't have to do anything. But for those that are struggling, whatever the reason, socially, emotionally, or health-wise, God forbid, they would have the option up until June 1st to go to pass-fail. To be clear, it has to be for all subjects. You can't pick and choose, like I'm doing well in math and I'm not doing well in language arts. It has to be across the board for marking period 4. But again, the default is keeping grades. And I want to open with that. I think we're all going to have a lot of questions, but I just wanted to frame the conversation. And I want to say, first of all, thank you so much before I get started to Christina Downey, who was my free lawyer that drafted it all, and to Karen Hirsch, who was definitely probably the best high school student in terms of research, because she did a ton of research across the board from what every district is doing to what every college is doing. But Ralph, Rick, and Judy were, I learned a ton. So I'm going to open it up now and go forth.
All right. Before we turn it over to board members, Ralph, Rick, Judy, I don't know if you wanted to weigh in, as this policy is geared towards the high school. So if you just want to unmute yourselves and let us know.
I think Ralph is trying to talk.
Ralph, you're muted.
There we go. I think this policy is a fair policy. It's we've gotten lots and lots of emails from both kids and parents saying that they want to keep their grades. We also gotten the same amount of emails from students who would like, and parents who would like us to go pass fail. So I think given the circumstances, we don't want to grade students based on their home environment, what's going on in their house. We want to grade them on what they know and what they can do. And so I think this policy will do that for us. Rick, Judy, you add anything?
No, I also agree. I think it's like the most fair option that we have to give people a choice. Because we don't really know what's going on in everybody's household, and we can provide them with some support in helping them make a decision.
Dr. Jones, before we turn it over to board members, I know that you had a Q&A if you wanted to explain some of the mechanics of this to people.
Sure. On the Q&A, what we did is we went through all of the comments that were submitted and then tried to extract where there were actual questions. We put that into Q&A document. It will be posted on board docs after this meeting, and we sent it to the board earlier today, but some board members did have comments. They thought the answers could be a little clearer for people who aren't in the weeds in grading. So we're updating, we want to update those before we actually post it and send it back to the board. Some of the questions had to do with things like, are we going to have finals? How will the calculation actually take place in terms of if you don't have the grade for the last marking period, but obviously you do for 1, 2, and 3. And in a very simple answer, and again, the document will be online, some of those things are part of what we consider regulations. So once we know what the board actually approves, if you approve this policy, then the high school staff will be able to go to work and figure out, you know, and part of the final exams, and Ralph can speak to this as well, is are we going to be in school or not? So right now our date is still May 20th. So if we come back after May 20th, would that look different than if we were in distance learning? So it's working through that process. And I will say, I mean, I think most of the indication is that we are probably going to be out, but you don't ever know until that decision's made. So that will be part of the regulation, and most of the questions have to do with those sorts of items. Anything else? I don't know if there was a question on there.
Well, why don't we jump into board discussion, and I'm sure they'll come up. So we'll start with Ms. Olson.
Yes, thank you to Policy PCG, because I think you came up with a really, can you guys hear me? Yeah. You can probably hear everything else in my house too, but I think you came up with a really fair compromise. You know, I mean, our goal is as a board is to do the best to meet the needs of all of our students, and I think taking into account you know, and thank you to Judy and Ralph and Rick and everyone, you know, Tony, because it seems like the perfect compromise. It seems like people that really want to keep grades can keep grades, and that's the default. And that, you know, pass-fail makes it possible for everyone who's struggling right now, and even people that, you know, I guess my only question would be. And I'm fully in support of this. My only question would be, and I know this is a guidance counselor thing, is just if somebody opted for grades and something happened, I'm sure that's why we have our guidance counselors. And if someone opted for grades and somebody, God forbid, fell sick in their household or something came up, that they would then be able to change that pass fail. Not just, oh, I'm not doing so well, I changed my mind. But, you know, really, that would be something they'd probably be in contact with the counselor about anyway. But other than that, I'm sure we have, you know, it sounds like you've done a great job.
You know, Megan, we didn't think about that, but that's a good point that you're making about if you make a decision, then all of a sudden something, you know, dreadful happens in your household, that we would go back and consider that and let people make some changes. So yeah, I think we would be very amenable to that, and that's something we can probably put in the regulations. Thank you.
All right, Mr. Kelly.
Great work on that. I think the compromise is excellent. I do have a question on the fail portion of the pass-fail. I know working with high school kids for a number of years in the capacity I had over the last 9 years, some kids don't have it as easy as others, and you're holding them together as a coach and in a sports program together with Scotch tape and almost glue sometimes. You hope to get them to the finish line with that extra support. So I could see it very easily in this environment, having some of these kids just fall to pieces. Now explain to me how a kid would have failed during this time of crisis. What do they have to do to actually fail? Because for me, I dread the fact that these kids would fail without the support they usually have in previous years, or when you are not experiencing a pandemic. what would constitute a fail, and how would we be working with these kids that have failed?
Well, Joe, we're working with these. We've started working with these kids back in March. Students that are not turning in work, they're not responding to their teachers. We've been working with them and making phone calls, doing that kind of stuff through guidance and through the deans to make sure we can get them back on track. We don't have a lot of students that are not participating any longer. Well, the majority of our students are now back into the groove of, if you can get into a groove of distance learning. And so, it'll be difficult for a child to fail unless they just don't turn in any work.
Yeah, I might add to that too, that let's say we have a student who's sitting at like a C, they've actually been doing pretty well, and they decide they want to go pass fail, and then they just disappear. Like, and even with that, we would be more inclined to give an incomplete, I know, because we want to really work with kids. But I think we also have to send a message that, we don't want people abusing the policy for the students. And I think from a teacher's perspective to know, we also want them to honor that you shouldn't just, be a student, then all of a sudden from now till June does nothing and just doesn't turn anything in thinking they're going to get a pass just automatically. So I think it's also part of that to make sure we don't lose student engagement. And I know some teachers worry about that. So, but again, for most of our students, I mean, they're doing a really good job at the high school, which, we mentioned before, of following up with students. So I wouldn't anticipate that that's going to happen.
Well, that's great. We got a lot of, as you know, a lot of emails and input on this topic. And it was really exciting and good to see that so many students are working so hard, and how disappointed they would be if we took away their possible opportunities at A's or improving their grades. So it's very encouraging to see how hard so many of them are working. But thank you for that answer. I appreciate it.
Peter, go ahead.
For any of you who worked on this, thank you very much. I think this is I strongly support having a pass-fail option, even on a temporary basis. As you're probably familiar, nearly all colleges and universities in the United States have been doing this for decades, but they've relaxed where they will allow pass-fail in their coursework. So there's a good model out there, and it seems to work pretty well. My question is very much around the implementation. And I read the policy carefully, and the proposed policy very carefully, as well as the policy that it references, which is 61.46.1, and read the statements in that. So Ralph or Judy or Rick, whoever's best positioned to answer, I've got a couple implementation questions. So my question is, in this proposal is, if a student chooses the pass-fail option, how is their grade calculated for that course? If you could use a practical example, or how would it be? And then how does that change, if in any way, the calculation of their GPA? So if you could take that first part and explain how you guys plan to do it, and then if there's any change to the way you'd be calculating the GPA, that would be helpful. And then I have another implementation question.
Well, Peter, as Tony said before, and as Kathleen also said, we were waiting for the board to pass the policy first before we started working on the regulations and determining all those two issues that you just brought up. I don't know, Rick, you want to give some more clarity to that?
Well, let me ask a question, Ralph. Have you guys thought about a scenario of the?
No, but we do want to, when we do put this together, we want to give examples of what it would look like for students, so they can make a better decision on whether they want to keep their grades or go pass fail. So we would give different examples for say, for example, for a full year course or for a semester course.
Rick, can you add anything to this?
Yeah, I can certainly help to clarify some things here. First of all, obviously, if a student chooses to go pass-fail for marking period 4, what will come out in our new regulations will basically talk about how the final grade would be calculated. And what we'd be doing is reweighting, if it's a full-year course, marking period 1, marking period 3, the midterm exam score, the marking period 3 grade, and then depending on whether or not we have a final exam score. We would in the regulation tell exactly how this reweighting would work for a full year course, and for a semester 2 course, we would talk about how the weighting would change with the marking period 3, and if we do have final exams. And then for basically our marking period 3 classes, our marking period 4 classes, which is wellness and PE, if a student goes with a pass-fail, then if they pass, their final grade will be a pass. If they fail, their final grade will be a fail. Let me address the GPAs. Greenwich High School on each report card basically has 3 different GPAs. We have a marking period GPA, and if a student, for the marking period 4 GPA, if a student chose pass-fail, there will be no marking period GPA calculated. Marking period GPA is typically only used for one purpose, and that's to determine who's on high honors and who's on the honor roll.
Right.
With respect to a year-end GPA, that's the year-end for that particular school year, there'll be no change in current practice there, because the year-end GPA is calculated using the final grade of all those courses for that given school year. With respect to the cumulative GPA will be calculated using the final grades of the full course of the full year and semester courses. So there'll be no change in current practice for those for year-end GPAs and for the cumulative GPAs, because they're all based on the final grade of those full year courses and semester courses. Does that help clarify, Peter?
Yeah, but Rick, let me go back. It's very helpful. Thank you. That's, you're a genius at this stuff. I'm sorry to see you going. We struggled together on a couple years ago on the problem with graduation requirements, and it's always great working with you because you always think through the details. My question is, Rick, I got what you said about the aggregate GPA, but I guess what I'm trying to understand is that, so you said you would reweight
Yes.
the student who has taken a pass-fail, which essentially means what?
Okay.
That
Can I give an
pass
example?
fail in marking period 4 just isn't included?
It is not included. So let me tell you what we normally do. If it's a 4-year course, marking period 1, marking period 2, marking period 3, marking period 4 are all 20% apiece.
Yes, I know
The
that.
midterm exam would be
10 and 10.
10 and 10. Now, if we go talk about a 4-year course now,
Right.
basically you have marking period 1, marking period 2, the midterm exam, the marking period 3 grade, the marking period 4 pass/fail will not be incorporated into the final grade calculation. So,
Okay. Yeah, that was what I thought you said. And then my next question is that relates to that is, when you publish a final transcript that is sent to colleges and universities, I presume you would be, because we highlight for certain things on transcripts, that courses that were taken had this pass-fail in it, and that is highlighted to the college and university?
I'm gonna let Judy, because we've with all these models and these regulations, we have a bunch of models out there, and we've just been discussing this, but I'm going to let Judy answer that particular one.
Yeah, there is precedent for it if there is an unusual situation with a student, or if a midterm exam is not given for some reason, to reweight things, and there isn't a notation on the transcript. I mean, we haven't gotten as far as deciding exactly what we would be doing. I do think that colleges will be asking either students or counselors, at least some colleges, what did your high school do during this time? Was there any change to your grades or anything like that? So obviously, if a student is asked, or if a counselor is asked, we'll have to answer what we did, but I don't know whether or not it would require anything on the transcript.
See, Judy, I mean, I'm sorry to get in the weeds here, but it's because I probably understand it, because I've had kids go through the system, the high school. If you don't have kids in high school, this is like super gorpy stuff, but it really winds up mattering. What I'm concerned about, Judy and Ralph and Rick, is the following. Parents are interested in the GPA. Many parents are interested in the GPA of their students, strictly for the purposes, and it's actually in our policy, it says the primary purpose of grading is to fairly, evenly, accurately, consistently communicate to post-secondary organizations how a student did. I mean, that's in our policy. That's written in the policy, and no one's suggesting changing that. So, and I know that colleges, kids, let's call a spade a spade. There are kids in school, and they're competing against other kids in their school for spots at particular universities. Not all, but they do compete. And what I'm concerned about is that you can wind up with a situation where a student who has gone all 4 quarters is doing B+, A- level work, and they could wind up with the same GPA as a kid who took a pass-fail in the 4th quarter and may have been doing less level work. And that could happen, and it's real. And as many of you know, and I think this is going to happen, you have some schools, Judy, as you know, that can get really personal with our kids. There are a lot of public universities that can't get that way with our kids, can't know them personally. University of Michigan as an example, or Penn State, or UConn, or what have you. It's a numbers game. So you don't get that level of granularity. And now that there's clearly an issue with the ACT and SAT, universities have already said, we're going to rely much more heavily now on looking at kids' GPAs. And I'm concerned that the way that we implement this, we have to deal with that potential free rider problem. And Judy, as you know, we put out transcripts. It is our practice that if a child has an IEP and the grade, the class was significantly modified, that is asterisked on transcripts that we put out, so the colleges and universities know that right off the bat. I think you guys could solve this one of 2 ways. I mean, you could solve it by not doing it the way Rick did it with weighting, or you could come up with a different weighting, or you could be certain that we're communicating this to colleges and universities. What I'm concerned about is, in our efforts to help those students who are struggling, who need to take the best thing for them to take is a pass-fail option, which I think we have to do. We can't do that at the disadvantage of kids who are not taking that option. And that's why I'm not okay with approving this policy, because the way universities do this is they do coursework pass-fail. They don't do parts of a course pass fail. So this proposal is part of your coursework is pass fail. And it's a really different kind of implementation. That's what's done. I think it's really intelligent, and it's, you know, specific to our needs in Greenwich. But I couldn't vote for this like this without knowing that we wouldn't disadvantage a whole bunch of kids to the advantage of the kids who took this option. It needs to be neutral for both.
I mean, my guess is that when a student chooses a pass-fail option, it's because out of necessity. And so, you know, the option, giving them that option really actually helps level the playing field from my perspective.
I'm sure there's some like that, but you also have the free rider problem. I mean, my daughter's in the high school.
I don't know what that means.
She's telling me about students in her classes all the time that are kind of phoning it in. And these are kids, by the way, they're not your free and reduced lunch kids. These are kids that many of us know. Ralph, you would know many of them. And they have all the resources in the world, but it just, they're not motivated because they're not in a class environment. They're not in a structured school environment. And you know, I think we have to come up with a way of doing this, which would be great. We should do it, and we should do it right away. But we need to have a way of communicating, particularly to colleges and universities, that if someone took this option, it's not the same as a. And you're right, out of necessity.
Mm-hmm. All right, Ms. Hirsch.
Thank you to Ralph, Rick, and Judy for all of their incredible input in helping us sort of craft this policy and what would be sort of the best for meeting the needs of all of our students. I know we were really looking to create a safety net and a ladder for our students, something to make sure that they knew that they wouldn't fall and that they had an opportunity to climb and grow. Because we know that there are varying needs across the district, and our mission really is to support the academic advancement and the social emotional well-being of our students. And I really think with your help and your input, we were sort of able to find a ground that meets the needs of all of the parents and students that have reached out to us. We've tried to address all the questions and concerns that have been shared with us. And I just wanted to sort of make it clear, and I think that Ralph and Rick can sort of speak to this. I know that we did ask about this before. Joe mentioned the option of a failure and guidance counselors. These decisions we had talked about were being made by a student with in coordination with their parent and guidance counselor. And I don't know if Ralph and Rick wanted to speak to this because it didn't come up yet, but there is an option for students who really are struggling when they aren't able to complete their work. And I know you said that there's teachers were given flexibility, and Flex Fridays are in place for that, but that there was sort of a way to look into that as well.
Like an incomplete, you mean, I think maybe?
Yeah, sorry, Judy, go ahead.
Oh, no,
We did, actually I did. I sent out an email to the staff a couple weeks ago. And basically it was, when in doubt, give that incomplete so that the student can make up that work and get a grade. So we're trying to be as flexible and as possible with the kids so that we don't want to see anybody fail. So we encourage teachers to give incompletes if necessary for the third marking period, and that'll be the same thing going forward with the fourth marking period.
And I guess the only other thing, and again, I had a quick question. I just wanted to, again, I know once you guys come up with your regulations, we'll have a better understanding. Just that, again, I think it goes to sort of, I guess, what Mr. Scher was referring to, just making sure that when our students are struggling, they choose a pass-fail option. We want to ensure that our students' grades aren't necessarily decreasing, that they're, either they choose pass-fail or continue with their grades, and just make sure that we know that this policy is sort of to support them and help them move forward. Because we're pretty aware that there are some differences between distance learning and their regular educational delivery.
Yes.
So.
All right, Ms. Kowalski.
Thank you.
Thanks. I think Peter a lot of the questions I have. So, but I have a couple of more, which is one, what is the benefit of the June 1, 2020 date as opposed to, say, making that decision now, deciding, no, I want to take the pass fail versus June 1, and perhaps there's some information they have by June 1 that they don't have now, but I'm curious as to understand the relevance of that date.
Is it progress report, Rick? I'm not sure. Rick may have a better idea.
Rick, you're muted if you want to unmute. Rick, I don't know if you can hear us. Oh, there you are. All right, you're unmuted now, Rick.
Well, I think what we were trying to do is we picked a pretty much later date, about the latest date possible to be able to manage this, to give students as much information as possible for them to make a very informed decision what's going to be the best interest of that particular child. And, there's a couple wild cards going out there. Are we in school or are we out of school? Hopefully we're going to find out here within a week from the commissioner or the governor there. But we wanted to give them as much time as possible to make a good decision with as much data as possible.
And my concern, right, I just want to make sure that obviously there are many different scenarios that are going on, and I compliment the policy. I agree that there should be a hybrid approach because we don't know what's going on in every family's home, and a pass-fail makes better sense for those kids. But is there a scenario, in which, someone who is takes the pass-fail component, and forgive me for riding on Peter's, freeloader concept, but someone who's just phoning it in and decides, oh, I'm just going to blow off the last semester because I've been doing fairly well, and takes the pass fail and passes, to those kids that are continuing to press forward and get, maybe they slip and they get an A- instead of their straight A's that they have been getting, or a B+ for that matter. Is there a way that that person somehow ends up getting a better grade point average than that student that decides to continue to take the grade and maybe had a little slippage in this process of, they've been a straight A student and they slipped a little because they thought they were going to, but under the scenario, they get a B+, right? And that kills their straight A average. Are they going to be hurt by this policy, and therefore the person that took the pass fail is going to come out on top?
I mean, mathematically, anything is possible. I mean,
right.
No matter what system you put in there, if a student is looking to game the system, I mean, they're bright enough, they're going to figure it out. We're trying to put this policy into place and set up regulations so it's going to basically try to help every kid that possible. But
okay.
Can I say with certainty it's going to be 100%? No, I can't say that. I don't think any system we have in place, it's going to be able to guarantee you that.
Okay. If we, and maybe this is a question for Ralph, what grade does a student get to still be considered a pass?
Well, that's something we haven't talked about either, Karen. Other districts have put out guidance on what they're doing with what is considered a pass and what is considered a fail. But we haven't looked at it. Like I said, we were waiting for this policy to get passed first before we started going into the weeds. But we did take a look at a number of high schools in both Fairfield County and around the state that we're comparable to, and we looked at what those numbers were. But we're going to have to put our numbers together for what's best for Greenwich High School. So we haven't decided that yet. Long answer for. Sorry.
Okay. No apologies. I just wanted to understand if back in my day, right, a D was still passing.
Oh, yeah.
and an F was not. But I don't know how that, I don't know
Yeah,
if that still works
currently
this
it's a
day and
60.
age.
Yeah, currently
60.
60 is passing.
60 is passing. Okay.
All right, Mr. Scher.
Yeah, that was what I was going to ask Ralph. What, if you've talked to these other districts, what are they doing? Because I think this is making my point, right? If a kid has marking period 4 and a D, and another kid has a marking period 4 and they've worked their ass off and they get an A, they're effectively, and the kid who's got the D just decides to take a pass fail, he or she's going to wind up with the identical, it's like a free pass. It's like they'll wind up with an identical GPA for the year. I mean, I'd love, we hear all that and we're not going to let that happen. And we're going to go back and redo all this regulation. But candidly, I mean, what are other districts doing, Ralph? What are grade level they giving a pass for? Do you know?
Yeah, well, offhand, it's pretty much the 59 point, whatever it was, to
Yeah, okay.
would be a fail, and as 60 plus would be a pass. But that's just some of the districts. Other districts are doing
Putting it at a level C. Most colleges and universities put it at a C, which I guess is 75 or 73, whatever it is. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, but other districts are also doing, they're weighting the third quarter more than the fourth, or they're combining the two, the third and fourth quarter together into one grade.
Another way
So,
to do
but most of the districts are going at it just like we are, a pass fail. It's not those were the outliers that were doing something completely.
Well, like I said, I don't hear any debate about a pass fail that I've heard any board member. I'm in full support of a pass fail. I just don't want a pass fail. I mean, we can live in whatever world we want to live in, but if you know Greenwich, let's talk about reality, right? There are people, some of the smartest people on the planet are here. And this idea that once we set this policy this way, where there's potentially a free ride, I like to think people won't do that, but they're really smart people and they're going to do what's best for their kid. And once we have the policy saying the option is there, you as the administrators are not going to have the authority to say no. So I'd rather see this policy with maybe a little bit more of this elaborated. And I'd love to be voting on this now, but I think we have to bring some certainty to this idea that we can kind of vote on it in concept and then we'll work out the details later. And from what I'm hearing from the way you guys have been thinking about it so far, seems like there's some more thinking needed. I'm really wondering if this thing is yet ready for prime time.
Well, Peter, I just have to say that, most policies, this is the way they're developed. The policy developed and the regulations are developed by the administration afterwards. This is nothing, I don't think, anything new.
No, it's not, Ralph. I'm not saying that. But typically when we vote on a policy change like this, our policies, go and read the other policies. They tend to be a little more specific than the way this one is written. This one has a couple clauses in it that say, kind of a player to be named later, right? Which is the administration will figure out the details later. We don't typically, they may not always be written in, but usually when the policy change is presented, this stuff's thought through. Now, I realize this thing's coming hard and fast. So no critique of anybody. I mean, this all got worked out in, 5 days, 6 days, something like that. So, it's not a criticism. It's just we typically tend to have kind of answers to these kinds of questions when we're making policy changes. And you're right, regulations come later. But they tend to be written down what was said rather than kind of think it up later. But anyway, here nor there. I've just been on the board too long, so I need to shut up.
Oh, biting my tongue, Miss Downey.
Thanks again to Rick, Ralph, and Judy. Oh, geez, of course, my house, everybody starts talking right now. Here's a thought, and I totally see Peter's point about kind of the gaming of the system, which we don't really want to think people are going to do, but some people, if they see an advantage, will do so. So this is a question that perhaps we could vote tonight on a sense of the meeting that the policy we're going to adopt is this notion of optionality, but that we're not necessarily going to vote on the policy per se without some type of regulations or guidance from the school that they say whether we're going to put an asterisk on the transcript where the kids have gone past fail or some sort of weighting. I don't know. I just, in terms of having board members feel comfortable with voting on the policy, because I think from what I'm hearing, everybody agrees in concept with the notion of a policy that gives options, right? I mean, and people can correct me if I'm wrong. I feel like everybody has pretty universally said you should be able to choose for the marking period whether you want to have a grade or whether you want to go pass fail, depending on what's going on in your family circumstances. It's just there are concerns about the impact of that decision on the transcript. And to the extent we can alleviate those concerns by having some greater details, again, because this has been quick, because we did want to give parents and families who were very concerned about what direction we were going based on what the state said, we wanted to get some certainty to them. But if they see the certainty is that you will be given a choice and things aren't going to be crammed down your throat in terms of a grade versus a pass fail, then perhaps we have some quick time frame with another special meeting that we can only have this issue on the agenda, and that perhaps it'll give the administration a little more time to kind of think through assuming that we're going this way, can create some boundaries, regulations, a template that would give the board members greater comfort in voting in favor of that. That's just a thought, if anyone would like to comment on that.
So I'm going to take my turn because I see the people that have their hands up have spoken once already. So I am very appreciative of the option method. I think people should actually have to opt in. I think it needs to be that discussion with the student, the parent, and the guidance counselor. This isn't anything anybody should be taking lightly. I also love the idea of the certainty. Look, I want early transparency for families. I think it matters, but I don't want anybody rushing to make a choice. I actually think the date that's in it makes a lot of sense, given that, as Rick said, it's about an informed decision, because by then they'll know what their grade is going to be. In terms of the free rider, I think actually controlling it's for all classes. It doesn't allow you to cherry pick the one class where you went from an A+ to an A-. Really remove some of that possibility of a free ride, because I can't imagine some of our high-flying students are going to want to wipe out the rest of the A+ on their transcript because they got an A-. I really do believe that. I also, believe in, based on everything I've read, and Judy, please correct me if I'm wrong, every college in America is going to have to figure out how to deal with this. Every school in America is figuring out how to deal with this. High school in America is figuring out how to deal with this. We are not alone in this. This is going to be a hard year for colleges making decisions. It's an awful year for our juniors who are truly affected by this. I think sophomores and freshmen a little bit less. I mean, obviously more long-term, but for our juniors, I do want to get them transparency on what we're going to do sooner than later. Christina, I don't think I have a negative reaction to doing it as a sense of the meeting, but I don't want to drag this out and try to make this absolutely perfect when we really do want to give the parents and the students certainty as to what it is that's going to be on the table for them. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Ms. Hirsch, who's next.
Oh, I apologize if you're yelling in the background. The draft is going on downstairs. And I guess my son and husband's team just got a good pick. Anyway, I did also want to point out one thing. I mean, and I think that this is a large area that we aren't discussing, is that, you know, distance learning is especially affecting our students with IEPs and 504s in a very different way, because they're not used to learning this way. And there are kids that are learning this way that didn't know that they couldn't learn this way. So I'm really in support of making sure that we do have those options. And much like Mr. Bernstein said, also, you know, I do think we need to give transparency to parents and to students. I know I particularly have a high school junior sitting in my house who is absolutely panicked about what is going to happen come this fall for college applications. And I know that he and the majority of those juniors, we've heard from a lot of parents and students in, you know, our junior year with that concern. And we just want to make sure that they don't have to worry about that when they're focusing on their work. So I just really did want to say, you know, if we do need to take a sense of the meeting and say that this is what we want, but we just want a little bit more understanding so that it goes forward with support, that's fine. But I know a lot of these, there are things that we did ask Rick and Ralph, and some of these things are sort of up in the air because we don't know when school might resume. So I did want to make sure that was also noted. The last piece of this is again, I am a researcher. I spent hours and hours reading district guidance from all over the country, all over our state, neighboring states and communities with similar schooling, you know, and so forth. And just saying, most districts have not actually released information as of yet. They're making those decisions pretty much in line with the same timing that we are. And so I know parents and some other board members have asked what other districts might be doing. And I have heard of a lot of districts that are doing the same idea of a hybrid pass-fail. There are districts out in California that are just giving straight A's to their students, which I think impacts them in a negative way also. So I know that we really are looking to find the best way to support every single one of our students with individual needs by doing this. And I don't think taking a pass-fail is something any student would probably do lightly. No. So I just wanted to, you know, I say we did discuss all of this when we were trying to create this policy in support of our students.
Ms. Stowe.
So I echo a lot what my committee members are saying. I think the key, just to sort of take us back again, is that we wanted to distress the community as much as we had the power to do. And so when the Connecticut State Department of Education came out with this, we said, let's get going on this immediately. And we did look at comps, but there were obviously a lot of people who didn't make decisions yet. But the key to us is to respond to our community, right? And we heard loud and clear from our community what they wanted. And it was nice that we had sort of the power to make that change, and that we also could be leaders, because frankly, in Greenwich, Connecticut, we should be leading. And so I'm happy if we need like a few more days. Obviously, I felt like our committee was over communicated so that we could move as quickly as possible and got all the key players involved. And I'm fine. I mean, obviously, I'm not really doing anything. I think that I'm not traveling next week. So if you know, people want to still get together and, you know, do this at any time, Monday, Tuesday. I just think the key is, and if we want to do it through a sense of a meeting, or if the, you know, reporters that are on just want to make sure that they write it up properly, that we all want to find the right solution for our families and our kids. And it seems that all of us want it to be a hybrid model so that we can, you know, serve everyone the best. But, you know, I'm also okay if you want to table it and until, you know, Monday, Tuesday, but let's do it in the near term, just because I think it's important that it's sort of final.
All right, Mr. Scher.
Christina, I think your suggestion is brilliant. I think it brings some clarity about direction to parents, but it keeps us on the track of saying we have to sweat some of the details so that we're supporting the kids that need support, but we're not doing that at the expense of other kids, that we're really just taking everybody into account. And I have a lot of confidence. You know, Ralph, Judy, and Rick, I've known you guys forever. I have a lot of confidence in you based on this feedback that you'll take it in and go, okay, maybe we need to make some adjustments. Maybe we need to make some clarity. I'm not looking to drag this thing out, but a sense of a meeting so that the public kind of understands we're going in this direction and we can take this up again quickly with clear policy, with more detail. That seems to me to be a brilliant compromise to move us forward and be able to, as a board, do what we're supposed to do, which is signaling to the public very clearly where we're going or where we're trying to take the district. I think it's also going to give us a chance, probably, not that we haven't had enough input already on this subject, to maybe have some folks give us additional things. Maybe they'll pop up things we're not even thinking about. So I'd be where you are, Kathleen, which is a couple days and let's take it up again, or a week or whatever is involved in the logistics of taking this up. We don't seem to have a problem with special meetings in a pandemic, so I'm not real worried about scheduling the calendar.
Just a point of order, Peter. I'm not sure how much detail would actually go into the policy because I think a lot of this truly is for regulation. So is your suggestion that they would start drafting the regulation so we would see what it looks like? Is that the idea?
Or Peter, I think the other thing we've seen more really frequently is usually there's supplemental materials that are presented to the board when there's a policy change sometime. And, you know, there's memos written and they're attached to the actual formal documents that we look at. They could start drafting the reg if they wanted. I'm just looking for clarity, and I'm not hung up on the format or the style of that. I just think, you know, there's some of these answers that need, if you go look at our other policies on these kind of subjects, they don't have these vague statements in them. They just don't. But as I say, I'm appreciating that this thing came fast and furious. So, you know, let's not let this worry about getting this thing perfect, but I think a little bit more clarity is helpful in whatever form that comes in. That's what I'd like to see. But, you know, other people have different opinion.
All right, Ms. Kowalski.
Thanks, Peter. So I like Christina's approach to this. I think it's a good compromise. I think the board is signaling to the public and to each other that we like this hybrid approach. We like the fact that students and their parents can make an educated decision on to take a pass-fail, and we appreciate that. I guess I'm looking for a little bit more clarity and into types of statements where we have here, it says, well, it'll be calculated in a manner to be determined by GHS administration. I mean, these are, I'm looking for a little bit more information to make sure that, you know, all of the students, you know, particularly those students that are choosing to take on and accept grades, that, you know, they're equally protected from, you know, the students that decide to take a pass-fail. And I know that probably sounds odd, but you know, I want to make sure that they're given the weight that they are given for taking that leap and putting in the effort during, you know, difficult times and deciding that that's the best thing for them. And I also want to make sure that those students that are taking the pass-fail, that their GPAs are equally protected, because I'm sure it's a difficult decision for them and their family to make as well. And this is a good starting point in my mind, and I think it just needs a little bit more fleshing out and maybe some more information from the administration, who've had a little bit more time than 5 days to think about how we're going to do this. But I think the signal is, yes, we like this hybrid approach. This is the way we're going. We just need a little bit more fleshing out. And I think given the fact that none of us are traveling and all of us have free Thursday nights from now until eternity at this point, you know, we can get on a call, and I'd be happy to do that.
I hope not. I'm hoping for must-see TV on Thursdays. Ms. Olson.
Yeah, I mean, I said this earlier. I think the hybrid approach is a great idea. I also, you know, I'm not sure that every little detail needs to be fleshed out by PCG. It feels almost like it's the administration that would need to flesh out those details. So I think it's pretty great as is. I think a lot of these problems could be solved as simple as what Ms. Downey suggested earlier, an asterisk next to if somebody took pass fail. You know, I could actually vote on this tonight, but I'm, you know, willing to show up again. I just think that I think it sounds to me like we're all on board, so. But I would, I think it could be solved with an asterisk, but definitely a hybrid approach.
All right, Mr. Kelly.
I agree. It seems we're all on board. Most of us are on board. I'd rather have all of us on board. So I think if we give it a little bit more time, as much as some of us might not want to do that, I think it's better to get a 8-0 vote than a less than 8-0 vote. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Joe. Peter, before I call on you, just process-wise, just to keep us on track. So the motion on the table right now is to accept the recommendation from policy governance. The way that I think we ought to do this, and Kathleen, I think what you would do is make a motion to table the vote on it to a future meeting. After that point, I think Ms. Downey is already working on a motion. This is my signal to her to work on a motion for a sense of the meeting. And then what we would do is during agenda planning, we'd talk calendar. And Kathleen, I just want to get your feedback on that before we move forward.
That's fine. Even when I put out this motion, or my first motion before this motion, as I said,
well, we'll have a second reading now. That's the best part.
Exactly. But as I even said, it was almost like a test for all of you. But no, it was a procedural to see that if we got here tonight, we could. But if I'm with Joe, I'd rather have the headline be that 8 of us got behind this. And so if everyone needs a couple more days, that's fine with me. So let me table my motion or remove my motion.
Well, you've got to make a motion to table the action on this to a meeting to be determined.
Okay, I am making a motion to table my motion to approve policy 6146.19 to a meeting to be determined.
Is there a second for that?
No, I'm Karen Hirsch. I'll table it. I'll second it.
All right, I think I heard Peter actually. Peter, you were the second.
I'm trying to signal support here, but yeah.
Okay, thank you. So Peter's the second on that. Any discussion on the motion to table? I'm not even sure you can have it. I think we're moving in a direction here. So I'm going to go ahead and take a roll call vote on the motion to table to a meeting to be determined. I'm a yes. Ms. Stowe?
Yes.
Ms. Hirsch?
Yes.
Ms. Downey?
Yes.
Mr. Kelly?
Yes.
Ms. Kowalski?
Yes.
Ms. Olson?
Yes.
And Mr. Scher?
Yes.
And Peter, your hand is still up.
I was just
all
going
right.
to offer if I wanted to make the next.
Oh, I think
the next motion, but if Christina wants to do it.
Yeah, I think
I've
Christina's
got one
got it.
drafted.
All right.
All right, so Ms. Downey, I believe you have a motion you'd like to make?
Yes. Do you want me to all right, here's a question. I can include the issue about letter grades as final grades on the transcript in the sense of the meeting, or I can exclude that. We can only talk about marking period 4. Do you want me to go more along the lines of what the policy said, more encompassing?
I would just.
Or just make it. Or I'll just
probably make it and then we'll go from there.
The sense of the meeting, we're gonna, and you don't need to get the details. Just they know what they're gonna do.
Yeah. So, okay. What I was going to propose, my motion is that a sense of the meeting resolution, that it is the sense of the meeting that in light of current circumstances, the Greenwich Board of Education supports a policy for the 1920 academic year for Greenwich High School that will provide each student an option to take all of his or her 4th marking period classes on a pass-fail basis in lieu of letter grades. Without that option, students will continue to receive letter grades for marking period 4. All students will receive letter grades as final grades for their courses.
Is there a second for that motion?
I'll second it. Kathleen Stowe. Mhm.
All right, Ms. Stowe. Discussion on the motion. I'm looking for hands.
There is an exception there.
I know that we're not doing the whole
Oh,
policy. This is
okay.
a sense of the meeting, Rick. This is just a sense of
So,
that's getting
Rick
into, that's why I was
Rick
trying
doesn't
to
raise
keep
his
it
hand,
streamlined.
so. All right. Are there board members that wish to discuss? If so, please raise your hand. Otherwise, we will vote on the sense of the meeting motion. Ms. Downey, do you want to try to read it again, or is everybody good with it? If everybody's good with it, we won't force you to do it again.
Call the question.
All right, gonna take a roll call vote. So
I think Peter said he had a question.
I
no,
said
he
call
said
the
call the
question.
question.
Oh, call the question.
Call the question. I heard him very clearly. All right, so Peter Bernstein is a yes. Ms. Stowe?
Yes.
Ms. Hirsch?
Yes.
Ms. Downey?
Yes.
Mr. Kelly?
Yes.
Ms. Kowalski?
Yes.
Ms. Olson?
Yes.
Mr. Scher?
Yes.
So the headline for our friends in the press is the board unanimously voted sense of the meeting that we're all in agreement. I want that noted on the record.
Okay.
All right, thank you very much. We will move on to our next item. When we get to agenda planning, we'll talk about the schedule a little bit. Next up is the Julian Curtis Ed Specs. I have a feeling this item is going to need more discussion, but I'm going to put it on the table so we can take it up for discussion tonight, and then we can move it on. We can move it off if we need to. So I'm going to move to approve the educational specifications for the Julian Curtis School as presented.
I'll second.
Mr. Kelly seconds. All right, Dr. Jones, we'll turn it over to you.
Joe Costa is on with his team as he was last time, and he's going to share just some basic renderings, test fit, and then show you how he put in the New Lebanon on the grid just next to JC, so it's easy for people to understand kind of what we're actually proposing. And we did have a committee meeting between the last meeting and this meeting and had some positive feedback. So Mr. Costa, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Jones, and good evening, Board of Ed. I'm going to make this very quick. We're going to skip over a lot of stuff in this presentation. You have it, I think, as part of your packet that we can refer to later, but I'm going to focus primarily tonight on a little bit of the program, what was changed since the last time we spoke a couple weeks ago. And then I'm going to ask my team, Michael Berger and Lauren Giamondo, to walk through not 3 options, but really 4 options, which I think cover the spectrum of options on the Julian Curtis site and that particular project. So I'm going to just start the presentation right now. Does everybody see the presentation yet?
Not yet.
Okay, we're going to get there. Anybody see the presentation?
Still not seeing it.
Okay. Let's try again.
All right, it looks like it's just getting ready to start, Joe. There
Okay,
you go.
sorry
Got
about
it.
that. I know it's late.
Okay, we've got it.
You got it? Perfect. Okay, I'm going to skip right through a lot of this stuff that you're seeing. There's no surprises for the existing building conditions. We talked about that last time, and the list of items to be addressed. I think we're also pretty much into a agreement, you know, energy efficiency, accessibility, security, technology, hardware, cafeteria, group instruction, all that stuff you've seen already. So we're going to just skip through that. The area, you know, the one piece of the program that changed, if you recall, the last time we had community connections for 20 students, that's been taken off the program currently. So we're including right now pre-kindergarten for 30 students and then kindergarten to 5th grade for 320 students, so a total of 350 students. So that's a significant change from the last time. Dr. Jones asked us to list as part of this table the new Lebanon elementary school program that was put together back in October of 2014. And so what we've done is we've added a column with those spaces. Now remember, this is the program. This may not actually reflect what was constructed on site because we can't go to the school right now. We can't confirm some of the areas. Once we're able to get back into the school, we'll fill in the actual areas. The columns in the middle are the existing Julian Curtis education spaces as they exist right now. And we talked about the averages. And then the last column are the proposed ed specs. And those have been recently updated earlier this week. Important number for you to focus on would be the last number, 70,756. That's our target area for this particular project. And that number is going to come up a little bit later as a significant number as we look at the 4 options. I'm going to skip through all this stuff. You can look at this at your own leisure. This is the space program, what we refer to as chiclets. So these are in-scale comparative sizes of the entire school program. And you can see the vast majority of the program is devoted to core academic classrooms and the common spaces, including the Learning Center. There's that number again. So when you compare the existing area, 60,515, and the target proposed program area of 70,756, there is a potential increase in the size of the building of a little over 10,000 square feet. So at this point, I want to hand it over to Mike and Lauren, and you guys run through the program, and I'll just keep flipping the slides as we go along.
Okay, thanks, Joe. Hello, everyone. And we're asked to keep this very brief. I know there's another discussion on the other project after this. So option 1 is the renovation and the addition scheme, which is a like-new renovation. So at the end of the day, you'll have a like-new product in every sense of the building. This scheme, the renovation and expansion scheme, one thing to keep in mind, this is the option that we're going to expand the gymnasium in place. We're going to change the orientation and extend the gymnasium out so you have a full-size gymnasium. So if you click it again, this is the existing footprint. Our solution, if you click it one more time, Joe, I think we can go right to the site plan. Our solution is to really close the loop. Right now you have a C basic configuration, which creates 2 dead ends inside the school for internal circulation. So our solution really constructs a sizable addition on the south end on the right-hand side, which consists of the cafeteria, an art room, a media center, and some associated classrooms and commons, which open up directly to play areas for the different age groups. So the proximity works very, very well. We are creating an enclosed kind of safe courtyard for the students, which is really desired for this age group. It really becomes an additional educational space, really a multi-use space and safe and corralled at the center of the school. And as I mentioned, the addition for the gymnasium expansion. The site configuration is very similar to what it is now. I think you have a nice site circulation with a bus and parent drop off. You have those fantastic athletic fields to the north, to the left, which remain untouched. And during the construction of the school, those would remain fully operational. We are disturbing some parking on the north side of the site. So the lower parking on the top of the page would remain. Some additional parking would be accommodated where Joe is circling there to pick up the additional number of parking. And also the service drive in the back of the school would be reconfigured. If you click it again, Joe. We're not going to run through this in detail for lack of time, but of course you can come back with any questions, but you see how we are really trying to make a 21st century school where we're locating classrooms, we're clustering classrooms where they should be. We're addressing security, obviously, at the front door, accessibility everywhere throughout the school. Everything will be accessible. Like we said, it will be a like new school when completed. As you can see, the media center, cafeteria, art, kitchen, pre-K, commons, all that will be new construction. A little addition to right size some classrooms, and then the gym expansion. We should mention that we've gotten to know the school very, very well by modeling this school in BIM and 3D and visiting the site and confirming it. We will be preserving many of the existing walls inside the school, so it will be sensitive renovations to the spaces that do remain to minimize disruption for the students. Click it again, Joe.
Mm-hmm.
And this is the upstairs. So again, it's an existing two-story building with a lower level basement. The final building will be the same, a two-level building with the existing basement. And then the addition on the right-hand side is a one-story addition with some of the larger spaces. Okay. This is by no means a design. We just wanted to mask this out to illustrate the volumes that we'll be designing as this moves forward. Again, being sensitive to the existing architecture of the building. The existing building has great character and charm, I think, and everyone agrees with that. So how these additions plug into and complement the building will be critical as we move forward. And another view of the gym, again, looking kind of southeast. Okay. Option 2, we can run through this one a little quicker. This one, it differs from the addition and renovation in that we looked at a portion of the school that is inefficient and actually demolish it and reconstruct it to make it more efficient. So we looked at this northeast knuckle of the building where there's some attic space, which is really, really inefficient. So what happens if we demolish that and take it all the way down to grade and then reconstruct? So in this option, what we're doing is reconstructing a gymnasium in its location, and then we're going to repurpose the existing gymnasium with a very similar addition on the right-hand side. Click it again, Joe. So the site actually functions identical to the previous scheme with the bus and parent loop working in place. I should have mentioned we do have a separate entrance for the pre-K and K entry. As Joe mentioned, we are keeping the pre-K currently in the program. We are not including the community connections from our discussions a couple of weeks ago. Okay. Very, very similar site or building circulation. Again, we have that loop circulation to create multiple paths around the school. You do have that nice secure courtyard, which will be activated with nice connections and views into the space. The cafeteria is still in the upper right-hand corner with direct access to the play areas for all the different age groups. The existing gymnasium would be renovated into the media center, and then a brand new gymnasium with a stage will be located where Joe is highlighting. Okay. And then upstairs, much like the previous scheme, the older students' classrooms and some support spaces would be located on the upper level. Option 3 is a brand new school. So the first option 3, first new school option rather, is to locate the new school on the athletic fields. This works great for phasing because there's minimal disruption to the existing school for students and faculty and parents utilizing the school. Once the new school is constructed, the students move into the school, then the existing school is leveled, demolished, and then the athletic fields, the baseball field and the softball field will be located in the footprint of the existing school. Okay. And this diagram just represents a pretty efficient building, actually, a little more efficient than the renovations because this is really custom designed. So you'll see in the square foot summary that the new options come out a little more efficient than the renovations because we're, in the renovation schemes, we're working around some inefficiencies of the existing building, but it still works out very well. Okay. And this is also a 2-story scheme. Joe, if you click the next level. Again, grades 2, 3, 4, and 5, the older students will be on the second level of this option. And the last option, we were asked, what can we actually fit a new school option where the existing play areas are and leave the existing ball fields untouched? So we took a quick look. I think this option can get better as it's further studied if this is the route that the town would like to go. But this would require a phased construction because you can't fit, in this game, you can't fit the entire school on that parcel of land while maintaining the existing school. So our option, if you click it again, Joe, We'd construct almost 90% of the school, but we would leave out the gymnasium in the stage until the existing school is knocked down. The thinking is that the students would, for 1 year, would use the cafeteria and maybe some adjacent other spaces temporarily as PE spaces until the existing school is knocked down, and then you can complete the construction of the gymnasium in the stage. There are some deficiencies with this plan. You can see kind of running out of land. I should mention the site drops off significantly to the east where that tree line begins. So you're fighting grade. So where do you locate the play areas? In this scheme, they're located up front, which is not ideal. It can happen. You can create nice secure areas for them, but it's not ideal. The travel distance from the drop off to the front door is greater than we would like. I think there's some potential with this scheme. I think we can improve it with time. And that's it for the plans. Yeah, again, we're creating a loop circulation, super efficient, compact plan with a courtyard, and then upstairs, again, it's very similar program layout, first floor versus second floor on all of these schemes.
Thanks, Mike. So as Mike mentioned, the new options tend to be more efficient in terms of the total gross square footage. And so if you look at option 3, which was the new building on the ball field, it's around 72,000 square foot. The option that Mike just presented is about 71, 72. So very, very similar square footages. The renovation expansion options happen to be a little bit bigger, around 82,000 square foot each. And that's due to the inefficiency of the existing building and plugging in old and new and dealing with some of the existing spaces that are in that building. So this particular chart really tells the whole story of, approximate sizes of the building and the kinds of new spaces that you're going to need in the proposed plan. The next steps will be, of course, is to provide the program for the education specifications to the board. The table that you saw there is only one piece of the education specs. There's an entire booklet that's being edited that describes the spaces and the mission and the goals in much greater detail. And then we're going to seek your approval of that education specification and hopefully get a sense of the direction that you would like to go as far as the 4 options or a 5th option or a modification of any of those options. And that's pretty much our presentation tonight. Greatly truncated because of late hour and it's been a long day for everybody. And so at this point, we'd like to open it up to any questions that you may have.
All right, so this is Peter Bernstein. I'm going to kick this off. I guess I want to remind the board members what the ed spec is. We are not voting on a plan. I thank you guys for the drawings, but we don't vote on the plan of the design at this point. It's actually very, very early. I like seeing the drawings. It's very helpful. What we vote on are the education specifications. The specifications are detailing what we believe needs to be in the building. That is the direction, again, that we give to the building committee. So I just think we need to keep that in mind. I don't want to be confused by we're voting on an option now, because we're really not. And I'll just give you some examples. As I said last time, and somebody's had kids go through there, and I know Joe has. It's a lovely building from the outside. We've just paid a lot to redo the roof, by the way. I'm sure you all remember how much fun that was. Options 3 and 4 actually, I think it might be option 4, eliminates the playground. The other thing you probably didn't take into account is on Anderson Road, there's a water pumping station right behind the school that actually makes noise. Right now, there's enough distance between it. It's not a problem for the building. But I know there's probably a lot of questions among board members about this proposal. I know there's work to be done on the ed spec, so I guess I'll stress this. I'm not in a position, I think, to vote on ed specs tonight. At some point after we've had our discussion, I believe there's a board member who's going to make a motion to table this, and I'm fully supportive of that. So with that, if board members want to raise their hands for discussion, I'm looking for you. Not seeing any hands, folks. Oh, there we go. All right, Ms. Hirsch, you're fast on the trigger. Okay, Karen Hirsch, did you want to talk? If not, Karen
Sorry, I
Kowalski.
forgot to take myself off mute.
Oh, there you go.
I know we got these specs earlier today. I've spent quite a bit of time today trying to sort of go through them and compare and contrast to the other buildings that we're comparing, trying to make them to level set with. Much like Peter said, I think there are a lot of holes in the ed specs as given to us. I'm certainly not ready to vote on this, but I did want to ask specifically because I know last time it was sort of said I knew parents from the JC community really love that school. It's an architectural wonder. They would not necessarily want to decimate that building and move it. Some of the ways you have suggested layout is not something for us to decide right now, but it certainly does affect and impact the neighboring community. But my bigger question is sort of, what I'd like to understand when we get more information, because I know you said you haven't had access to the building, to see the current size of some of the spaces that are missing from the document you've given us in comparison to where we'd like them to be. Like some of the classrooms that you're suggesting enlarging, what they are now currently versus what we would like them to be. Because I know the buildings that we're comparing them to, so my question really comes down to saying, I'd really like to see more detail on what's there now versus what you're suggesting. And also to sort of see, because options 1 and 2, you say that you're focused on sort of the increase would be around, your target square footage is about 70,756 square feet, but options 1 and 2 add another 10,000 on top of that. Both of them are over 80,000 square feet. So I'd sort of like to see how the space is being used now versus, how we would hit the appropriate target number, and why those two options. I know you said that there's areas that are ineffectual, but I'd like to have a little more understanding of what those areas are that make that increase of 10,000 square feet more. You might not have the answers tonight, but.
Yeah. If you look at the program, if I could scroll to it, I'm just going to go a couple more slides. I apologize, this is taking a long time. Just to be clear, the spaces that you see in the existing Julian Curtis column are sizes of spaces that were pulled from the existing contract documents and then checked in the field. The ones that were not checked in the field were the New Lebanon Elementary School program, because we can't get to the building. So the New Lebanon program numbers that you see in the first column were from the ed specs. The Julian Curtis numbers were actually from the existing contract documents or the old drawings in 1946 and field measurements. So the actual middle column is pretty accurate.
Well, the middle column just says existing spaces at Julian Curtis, and there's nothing noted for the actual size of the current classrooms.
They actually are. They are actually noted. If you look where it says general second floor classrooms, that 864 number is actually an average of the classrooms that exist. So what we did is we measured them, added them up, and divided by the number of rooms. They were surprisingly close in size. Now they are a little bit bigger than the program for New Lebanon, but not by much. Same thing with the kindergarten classrooms. You see that they're
And
about,
the other
about
question, I guess,
1,100.
I know I asked this last time, but I still would like, yeah, sorry.
No, I'm sorry. I apologize.
I didn't realize you were still pointing out stuff. I'll silent myself.
Yeah, no, what I was saying is if you look at the pre-kindergarten, the kindergarten classroom of 1,096, we did the same method. We actually measured the rooms, added them up, and divided by the 3 rooms to get that number. What happens if you try to show every single space of the exact same square footage, the table becomes incredibly long, and it's hard to process that information. We have found over the years that if we take the average, it actually works better when we're trying to create a new ed spec. So you can compare the existing with the proposed at a glance. And we did that, basically across the board. Now, for spaces that are one-offs, for example, the art classroom, if you look at the top of this page, it's 1,079 square feet. But in that particular room, the storage and the kiln are actually located within the space itself. And in a new program, we would always try to separate those rooms and create spaces for storage and kiln as a separate room. And, if you were to compare the two programs for the art, you'd see one existing was 1,079, and then they proposed this slightly larger, accommodating for those separate rooms. And we did that all the way down this particular study. The gymnasium is a big one. The existing is about 3,400, and we're proposing 5,700. I think we talked about that last time. And I think there was a question about the New Lebanon gym, and that was originally also programmed at around 5,000 square feet. So this is a lot of information, but the part that I was mentioning before is the fact that we haven't verified the New Lebanon program because we don't have access to the contract documents, and we don't have access to the actual building where we can take some key measurements.
So just before I call Ms. Kowalski, having served on the New Leb Building Committee, I can tell you they're pretty accurate against the ed specs. If there's differences, they're by feet, not hundreds of feet. So we took them quite literally. One thing I do know also from being on that project is there's never enough storage. That was a huge learning. And the other thing is the gym at New Leb is undersized. Use the old Glenville's gym, which should be the basis, was the actual gym from the old building, and it was actually left in place and reused. But the New Leb gym is actually too small.
Yeah, we noticed that. That's why we programmed the new one at 5,700. So it's slightly larger than the New Lebanon, recognizing that a 50 by 80 court would not fit in 5,000 square feet and be safe basketball.
Yeah, you find that there's no space on the baselines. Ms. Kowalski.
Sure, thanks, Peter. Karen, I thought I heard something. Did you have another question? I don't want to take time away.
Well, no, I did, but he didn't. The one question I did ask that didn't get answered, and you may not have the answer now, is the difference between, you were focusing on 70,700 some odd square feet, and the first two options were 80. I didn't know what spaces were ineffectual and why they couldn't be repurposed. That was all I was curious. That adds 10,000 square feet.
What we can do is we can circle back on that and give you a pretty detailed answer. And, we can issue that through Dr. Jones's office so that you understand, where those inefficiencies are.
Yeah. Thank you.
We can do that for you. Yeah, no problem.
Sure. Hi, this is Karen Kowalski. So I'm the, as Peter mentioned, I'm the one who's going to make a motion ultimately to, table this vote, because I too am not prepared to vote. And here are a couple of my questions, and they're really more comments than questions. And I don't think you'd be able to answer them. But I think what I'd like to understand is from an ed spec component, what ultimately are we trying to accomplish? And I think the board needs to get on the same page with this, right? We're using the ed specs from previous elementaries that we have completely redone and for needed purpose. But my understanding here for this particular school is that's not what needed to be done here. This is, from what I've been told on numerous meetings, is that this building, while as a post-war building, was actually built with pre-war modeling, construction, et cetera, in kind, and is actually a really sound building that has to be updated in some respects, but for all purposes is a really good building. And so my issue here is, you know, from these specifications, we seem to be adding on a lot at probably what would likely be a very hefty price tag. And when I'm particularly looking, and I see the change, previously it was adding 1 classroom and now we're adding 3 classrooms, but the classroom sizes are bigger than what we're proposing that we would get, if I'm looking at this correctly. And I see that what this school really needs is a larger gym area and a cafeteria. So I'm wondering if these ed specs are too much, right, for what we need to accomplish to make this school a really great school. And if we are establishing a precedent as a board, and if this is what we want to do, then we need to make sure we're all on the same page of it, is that every school that comes up in the line of schools to be done gets completely revamped and gets updated to an ed spec that is more than what the school needs, right? There's a difference between a need versus want. And I'm not talking about Band-Aid need, I'm talking about what we need to make it a good school. And the question is, are we doing more here than what needs to be, particularly when our budget is getting slashed in the likes of maybe $3 million next year, and how this type of change fits within what we've already budgeted from a capital projects perspective, and whether or not going down the line, when we get to Old Greenwich, we're going to be doing the same thing and we have similar amount of funds to do that, and if we're revamping that school together. So I think I'm not prepared to vote on this tonight because I need some general understanding from the ed specs component as whether or not these are even the right specs for this building and the right specs going forward for all buildings. And that's my general concern. The motion on the table is to approve these ed specs, and if we approve these ed specs, then these are the specs going forward, and it's a matter of building a building around it. And my concern is that these ed specs are not the right specs for this particular building and for the needs that what needs to be accomplished. And we just, I think as a board, need to figure out a way to get some clarity on that piece. And Peter Bernstein, I'm not quite sure how to get that, but I think that's what we need here.
All right, Christina Downey.
I'm following a little bit in Karen Kowalski's footsteps, just to understand our process of what I see. We have the ed specs, and kind of what's our goal right now is to approve them so that we're going to construction. So I like all the renderings and the concepts, but we're really not voting on those. So I'm just trying to understand really our goal, other than obviously we have to approve ed specs so that then the next stage can begin. But what should be our process? And Peter, you've done this before with New Lab, and I kind of came into that building later in the process. So, and maybe Joe can also speak to it since he's on this committee, in terms of how you see this all really unfolding before we're getting to the point that we can actually. Yeah, well, you said you started this with, we're not going to vote on it tonight, I think, because a number of us aren't feeling prepared to vote on it. So kind of what makes us prepared to vote on it?
We'll let Peter share go, and then we can talk more about that. Peter?
Christina, I'm where you are, but going through this, the short answer is if you haven't been through this before, and I learned this the hard way, when you vote on this, you're essentially voting on the specification that's given to the architect. So this kind of becomes the project, right? Now you can adjust it later, but in my experience with this stuff, once it gets momentum out of this vote, you're off to the races, right? So, and that's what happened at New Lebanon. We contemplated this numerous times. I can remember sitting in the cafeteria at New Lebanon and Ben Branyan presenting it for the first time, but there was a lot of back and forth on that before we voted it on the first time. And then Peter, I'm sure, can give you every twist and turn of how it played out from there. I had a question, and then maybe I have a comment based upon what I'm seeing. Mr. Costa, the options, and maybe you guys talked about this, I suppose I just stepped away to use a little boys' room. If I look at your options page, that summary options page.
Yep, the numbers.
Yeah, I see the sizing. Is there a cost range for each one of those?
We don't have that yet. That would be
Okay.
the next step, is to give it to the cost estimator so that they can put a conceptual budget on each of the options.
Yeah.
And along with that will be an anticipated state grant reimbursement estimate, so that you would have you'd have the information of what the construction costs are likely to be, and also what participation you're likely to have at the state level.
Yeah,
We tend to be a little bit conservative with that, but at least there will be something from the state, and different options have different reimbursement rates, as you know.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. So I realized we embarked on this project and it's hurtling down its path. I love, it's great what we're seeing. This is always a fun part of being on the board. People get all excited on the board when you're, talking about buildings and building stuff and improving student experiences and what have you. My issue with this is this is a pre-COVID project. This is the right project for where we were living January 1, 2020. And no offense to our friends at the architecture firm. I think you guys did a great job based upon, the remit that you were given. I think this is not the right thing to be doing now, post-COVID. I would be concerned about voting for this for no other reason than it would be really tone deaf of us as a board to be talking about trying to vote this project forward, when you've got 25 million people out of work. I'm not debating the need. This scope, by the way, is not what I expected. Now, I lived through every twist and turn of the capital plan, from the inception of picking the architecture firms that did that, all the way through. And this building, the plan was the main remit was address ADA issues. That's why it has a high priority on it. And address some space issues in the building, primarily, and student spaces. Cafeteria is an issue in this building. It's an issue in all our 1925 buildings. But somehow I think the process that we're following, which is, hey, go turn this building into the spec that is from essentially Glenville, because Glenville became the spec that became New Lebanon. Maybe even some of you are not aware of that. Glenville became the standard. That became the standard for, that's a very different project than just trying to address ADA and specific concerns. That's why if I read this, you look at this, it's 10,000 feet of space, but it's a lot of administrative space, a bigger gym, more storage. There's a lot of stuff in here that's really would be great to have. And I say, you know, if we had an economy that was roaring along like we had on January 1, this would be a great project to propose. But given our financial situation, I don't even think this thing's tenable. So, you know, there's a bigger question also, which is our enrollment about to, what's going to happen to our enrollment post-COVID? Is it going to go up? We're going to have a big bubble because there's an argument for that. Kids moving out of the city, so on and so forth. Is it going to shrink because people are not going to want to live in suburbs? Who the hell knows? I'm a little concerned that there's a lot of uncertainties about this. So I'd like to see this keep being developed and maybe evolved. But in its current form, I couldn't vote for it. I most certainly can't vote for it if I don't have any idea, even a range of what this project would cost.
All right, Mr. Kelly.
Well, tonight we're talking about voting on the ed specs, and I think there's further discussion to be had. Obviously, on the ed specs, there are many other topics that just came up as well we need to talk about. So I suggest we move on and then vote on putting this off to another time.
Oh, was that the consensus? Okay, then I'll shut up.
And Peter, I'm not sure that you were with us during the last meeting. I know you had to drop off. So, you know, some of the discussion we had there as well, and I think it's valid. One thing I will say is the next phase of this, basically the incremental cost is about starting to develop the plan. It's not the building. And I think our job generally is to tell the town what we think we need. And then there's the discussion about what's actually feasible. So I think that's where the discussion as to how this moves forward. In fact, in our capital request for next year, that was passed by the first selectman on to the BET, the next phase for Julian Curtis is in there. That's a discussion, obviously, the BET is having now around the overall budget, some on the operating side and certainly some on the capital side. So that discussion is happening. At the same time, I don't know that we would stop the work that we're doing now in order to put this in its best position for when it moves forward. And the question of when is probably determined by the money more than anything else. So that's it. Ms. Kowalski, at this point, I don't see any other hands, so I don't know if you wanted to make your motion.
Yes, I'd like to make a motion to table a vote on the ed specs for Julian Curtis until a time where we can have additional clarity pursuant to the discussions we've had this evening.
I'll second it.
All right, any discussion on the motion to table? Hearing none, take the roll call vote. Peter Bernstein is a yes. Ms. Stowe?
Yes.
Ms. Hirsch?
Yes.
Ms. Downey?
Yes.
Mr. Kelly?
Yes.
Ms. Kowalski?
Yes.
Ms. Olson?
Yes.
Mr. Scher?
Yes.
Great, thank you. So that passes 8-0. We will table that. We can talk about it during agenda planning, or we'll work with the superintendent to figure out when that should come back to us. All right, next up is the GHS entryway specs. Can I get a motion to approve that item so we can put it on the table for discussion?
I'll make a motion to put that item on the table.
All right, is there a second? Actually, Peter, it'd be a motion to approve the ed specs.
Yeah, I'll make a motion. I will make a motion to approve the education specifications for a new security lobby at Greenwich High School as proposed, as presented on our agenda.
Great, is there a second?
Oh, this is Karen Hirsch. I'll second it.
All right, Dr. Jones, I'll turn it back over to you.
Yeah, we had a meeting on this project also since the last meeting. People are very happy with kind of the renderings, what they feel good about the project. So I'm going to turn it over to David. And it's mainly if you have questions, because we answered most of the questions for the board at the last meeting. So David?
Yeah, good evening, everybody. I can share my screen and bring up the presentation that I gave to the board a few weeks ago and have given to the working group. So if there is any questions. We some of the items I just want to point out of items of discussion that would be part of further development is essentially the floor plan that you will have in front of you in a second, which should be up on your screen if everybody could see that. It's just the circulation, the internal circulation of how the division between the student entryway and the visitor entryway is divided, and how that functions either during early morning, during morning drop off, an entryway, or when it's at the end of the day. So circulation, that still needs to be hashed out, but those are design details. Some of the other discussions were, again, design related, such as audio video equipment, security surveillance, fire alarm placement. Those are really kind of the nuts and bolts of it, but essentially the ed specs as we have developed in my last slide, and there is a detailed, more of a detailed narrative that I did provide to Dr. Jones, but this is just the overall sort of summary of that, which provides the bulleted items that essentially sets the stage for you to take this on to the next phase of a project, which is really to get into the design of it. Again, what we were showing you is really just a concept idea of what that wants to be, but these are really the educational specific items that you should be reviewing and essentially approving to move the project and concept forward.
Great, thank you.
Yeah,
Are there board members who have comments, questions? Mr. Chair.
I have one question, and this maybe helps with the question on the spec. The ed spec we would be voting on is essentially, here's all the things that the system must have. But in some cases, some of these items we already have, right? So this isn't a spec that, at this stage, we're not saying all these things have to be created new. In some cases, they may already exist. In some cases, they don't. Correct?
That's absolutely correct. In some cases, there may just be a modification or upgrade to some of the systems. Some may be brand new. So you're absolutely right. That's not defined here yet because we haven't evaluated all of the detail of each of those systems. So you are correct in your statement.
Okay. You guys did some great work. I think this, everybody's heard me. I'm like a broken record on this item. We should have had the security lobby a long time ago. I hope everybody will support this thing and we can get this project moving. To me, COVID or no COVID, this is the kind of project we absolutely need to be doing.
Ms. Stowe.
Yeah, to me, this is safety and security. All of our students end up there. This is a no-brainer. I say we vote this one through.
Mr. Kelly.
Safety of our students is absolutely paramount. It's the most important thing for us, and we have to push this one forward.
All right, thank you. Ms. Kowalski.
Yeah, I agree. This day and age, there is no expense that should be cast aside for making sure that our kids are safe in being in school, which should be the safest place other than their home on earth.
All right, Ms. Hirsch.
No, I completely agree. This has been something that, like Mr. Sheriff said, we've discussed for a long time. It puts our students in a very precarious position, and I think that these ed specs really speak to the things that our students need to stay safe, as well as our staff. And I just, it just makes sense.
Ms. Downey.
Having served on this committee, this is great to have a project that there's real unanimity in going forward with it. So I wholeheartedly support it. I just had one or two questions that on the document that we received on the first page, there's a couple of blanks, like there's what year the high school was constructed and how long it served the community. So I don't know if those need to be filled in before we can vote on it for sure. That's a question.
I don't
Peter,
think that
the process
not-
question is somebody going to
Peter.
put this in real education specification document format? I know this is a PowerPoint. This isn't typically how we take up an actual ed spec, but I presume somebody afterwards is going to turn this into the real ed spec document format. Is that
Right, so my
If you look
question
at the
was just
doc
if there
on
were
board
any
doc-
kind of minor nits in this, in what was sent to us in terms of the text, whether we need to
Yeah.
address those now, or if they're kind of Scribner's errors kind of things that we don't have to worry about.
Yeah, I think that can be cleaned up later. And Peter, if you look at the document that's posted on board docs, it's not the PowerPoint that's the ed specs. It's the actual document that precedes the PowerPoint that lays things out in detail, provides the narrative, which if you actually looked at it, would line up very well with the Connecticut standards that were post Sandy Hook.
Right, but that it's on page 1 of those where there was one.
Right, now they
minor-
can clean that up. That document, I believe, is still marked as a draft. So.
It is, and so that was where my question was.
Yeah, but my point was, Peter, it tends to have a cover on it, some other things. I've seen this document. I got that part, but I
don't think this is as complicated a project as the as building some of the other things we've done.
Right, and then it had this PowerPoint in the back of it, which isn't normally in a net spec. So that's why I was asking, is somebody going to go make this all conforming, I guess? I presume they are. I guess the answer.
Yeah, I mean, we can leave that with Dr. Jones and her staff, but the Word document is the actual education specification, and they can use the nice pictures as the cover sheet if that's what's needed.
So it ends at the page that says the written draft page 2 of 2. That's what we're asked to vote on. The rest.
No, there's pages after that, Peter, that if you get, the where it has the numbered points.
No, I was on the point of if I go through the document online, right? There's the cover sheet. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
Yeah.
Printed
Yeah.
documents.
Got it.
The PowerPoint is not a part of the ed spec. It's there as information, correct?
This is David Stein. That is correct. Typically, my PowerPoint is just here for presentation purposes for you. The written document, and that would need to be memorialized. Draft would need to be removed, and so forth. Right. That is essentially what you are voting on, and the state is interested in seeing as your document, not my PowerPoint.
Correct. Yeah, that was my experience too. Thank you very much. Okay, I know.
Okay, and just along those lines with that, I had one other on the draft page 2. And this is just to be sure I understand it. In point 1B, you've got in there, it says all the other doors will be locked from the outside. Aren't they locked from the inside?
I'll reword that. I think my intent was that it would be access would be locked from the outside.
Okay, yeah, I just found that to be kind of ambiguous. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I could reword that. Essentially, what I was trying to say is you're always able to exit out the building.
Right. So yeah, I just rephrased that then. Thank you.
You're welcome.
David, just 2 quick questions for you, Peter Bernstein. One, do you have a general sense of the cost of constructing just as presented? I know it's not the final design. And then the second part of that is, what's the state reimbursement scheme, especially given the security aspect of this project?
So in terms of dollars, we did put together a budget of ranging somewhere between $500 and $600 a square foot at about we're at 2,000 square feet. So we're looking at all the other ancillary costs that go in there. It's just under a $2 million project is what the range we projected, and this was 2 months ago. So I have to say, in the world of construction costs have gone just where the market has gone, up, down, and all around. So some of this is hard to predict when we're being asked these questions today. 6 weeks ago, I would say the cost is between $500 and $600 a square foot for what we are doing there. And I think there was one other question. I'm sorry, I didn't.
The state reimbursement level due to the fact that it's a security project.
Yeah, that would be, it's full, you will maximize your full reimbursement on that. It will not be prorated down in any way.
What is the rate? Is there a percentage rate that we?
It's your, I do not know your standard rate. I think you're just under 20 or so, maybe slightly under.
Sean,
it's of your current reimbursement rate for a standard project.
Okay, and I presume Tony, Sean could figure that out for us.
Yeah, I do know it's in that range. I just don't know the exact number.
But anywhere between 10 and 20%.
Yeah, I would say 15 to 20, but I'll get the exact number.
Great, thank you. All right, seeing no more hands up for discussion, do we want to take a vote? The motion on the table is to approve the educational specifications for the Greenwich High School entryway as presented. We'll do the roll call. So Peter Bernstein is a yes. Ms. Stowe?
Yes.
Ms. Hirsch?
Yes.
Ms. Downey?
Yes.
Mr. Kelly?
Yes.
Ms. Kowalski?
Yes.
Ms. Olson?
Yes.
Mr. Scher?
Yes.
All right, well, thank you very much. Our request for the funding for the next phase is with the BET. I personally hope that this is one of the items that survives the purge on Monday. With that, we'll move on to our final action item of the night, which is a wrestling mat gift request. And do we have a motion for that?
I'll make the motion.
Sure, Mr. Kelly.
That'd be great. I'd like to approve the donation from the GAF for the purchase of the new wrestling mat, totaling an approximate value of $13,000.
Great, and I'm happy to second that motion. I'm not sure who's presenting, so Dr. Jones, I don't know if you can tell us.
I'll do it.
Oh, Sean, great.
Yep. All right, so very quickly, this is to seek Board of Ed approval to accept a donation of 50% of the cost of a 40-foot by 40-foot three-section mat for the Greenwich High School wrestling team. The total cost of the mat is $12,423, so we have a more precise number. And the Greenwich Athletic Foundation has offered to cover 50% of that cost, so a little more than $6,200. The second half of the cost will be covered by fundraising activities by the wrestling team.
All right, I want to make sure I understand that. So the actual donation is only for $6,200.
That's correct.
So
yeah, when the form was filled out, they put an estimated total amount of the mats, but the actual donation is about half of $12,423, so $6,222.
So what is the intention in terms of actually ordering the mat? Because I just want to make sure the district doesn't find itself on the hook for the other $6,200.
My understanding is that the GAF will be ordering the mat, and they will be putting the 50% deposit down. And I know Tom O'Brien, who is in the building today and tomorrow, will be cutting a check for the other half if approved.
That's not our procedure.
Yeah, I think you're right, Peter. That actually sounds highly unusual. Usually we would accept the gift of the actual item. So it sounds like we're accepting half of it and laying out the other half on the future potential promise that they're able to raise the other portion.
Well, yeah, but the other part of the procedure is that Peter, I mean, we went around and around on this many times, is the administration wanted to be the people managing projects. So they're supposed to give us the gift and our procurement is supposed to go buy it. And then we're supposed to have direct control over when it gets shipped, who it gets shipped to, how it gets installed, all that. there's a reason that gift policy and that gift procedure was built that way. I mean, I personally, I don't care, but Sean, the administration always was kind of religious about that. I don't know what's changed.
I think we can ask them to go back and do it exactly that way.
Yeah, but
I don't think that's going to be a problem.
But to Peter's point, is this will we have the money? I shouldn't say it doesn't matter whether they have the money. They're on the hook for the money and we're not ordering it until we get the money, correct?
Correct. The fundraising on the other half is already raised, so it's a matter of getting the money from the GIF.
Getting the money from the GIF.
I'm confused by that, Sean. So did the wrestling team already raise the money?
Yes.
Who's
So
the
wrestling team has the half of the money. The GAF has the other half.
Correct. That's how it would be funded.
If I may.
Yes, Mr. Kelly.
Jerry Peterson, a fine wrestling coach. He's in his second season, I believe, at the high school, doing a great job. He contacted me earlier today and told me that the fundraising operations took place with the Booster Club with a promise from the GAF to match half of the raise that the Booster Club raised. I was told that the Booster Club raised that money and the GAF came and came up with the other sum, and that's what we're voting on the approval of.
What?
Megan, I think you're unmuted.
Oh, sorry.
Okay. All right, so they have the money.
Okay, I guess then the question is, are we following our process, Mr. O'Keefe? If they do have the money, and Peter's right, our process has typically been a little different from this. I just want to make sure we're not changing midstream.
So the process would be that we go through our own procurement, we buy it, but before we pull the trigger, we get the funding from the GAF.
Yeah, or you have the clear commitment, not commitment, but you have it in writing that you're getting it, right? That they're cutting the check. That was
I would say make sure we have the check, not a commitment.
Sean, it's actually written down. This whole thing is in excruciating detail. It's written down. You could probably go back and ask Mike Antonaccio. I don't know where it went with the policy changes. I hope nobody ditched all those regulations and procedures because they have to live with the old ones until they're replaced with new ones. But this is already all written down.
Okay.
If that helps you.
I mean, there's a possible path forward where we just condition it on making sure the process is followed. So we could amend the motion to do that. That way we won't slow it down. If you feel satisfied that the process is being followed, you'd be able to go forward with it. But
I'm okay with this based upon what Joe said.
Okay, if the money's out there. I just want to make sure we're
I'd like to add one more thing.
Yeah, Joe.
One more thing, I'd like to add a thank you to the Booster Club for the wrestling team for raising that money, and a thank you to the GAF for matching that money. So let's give a big thank you to those two.
Yeah, absolutely. And one thing though, Sean, you should have them amend the form so it actually reflects that half of that donation came from the Booster Club, because as written, it shows that it's just the Greenwich Athletic
Absolutely. Absolutely will.
I want to make sure the Booster Club gets all the credit they deserve, along with the GAF who thoughtfully matched it.
And Peter, maybe it's best you craft the wording of this motion to reflect what you just talked about.
Well, I mean, if folks are okay approving it without that, we can go that way. But the idea is that we just want to make sure it follows procedure. So the motion right now would be to approve it. It's my own motion, so I don't think I can actually make the motion to amend. I don't know if somebody else wants to attempt that.
Can you just withdraw your original motion?
It was seconded, but yeah, sure. We'll withdraw the original motion, and I'll make a motion to approve the acceptance of the wrestling mat. Actually, Joe, I'll say the motion, and then you can tell me if you want to make it. How about that?
Sounds good.
That way we keep you making the motion. So Joe, I would propose that you make a motion to accept the wrestling mat gift from the GAF and wrestling team booster club in the amount of approximately $13,000, subject to meeting the approvals of our gift acceptance process.
Excellent. So make a motion to approve the donation from the JAF and the Booster Club for around $13,000 for wrestling mats, as long as it is in line with our
process.
Thank you.
I'll second that motion. Any further discussion on that motion? All those in favor? So Peter Bernstein's a yes. Ms. Stowe?
Yes.
All right. Ms. Hirsch?
Yes.
Ms. Downey?
Yes.
Mr. Kelly?
Yes.
Ms. Kowalski?
Yes.
Ms. Olson?
Yes.
Mr. Scher?
Hold on. Get off mute. Am I mute?
Yeah, no, you're good.
I'm
We can hear you.
No, yes.
Okay, great. That is passed unanimously, 8-0, which brings us to our agenda plan. Again, we're, in sort of wishy-washy land. So our next scheduled meeting is May 7th, knowing that we would like to take up the graduation policy first. Mr., when do you think you'd like to get PGC together along with your friends from the administration to try to rectify some of the questions that were asked tonight?
Sure. How is Tuesday morning, the 28th of April, for my team and Ralph and your team?
All right, so if you're looking at the 28th, our board members free on the 30th. That gives us a little time to digest after PGC meets, ask questions on Wednesday, to have answers Thursday, and possibly take action.
I think the administrators are no longer on.
Ralph is.
Okay.
Ralph, can you meet on Tuesday morning?
Kathleen, we are good after, leadership is good after 10 o'clock, so yeah.
Okay, cool. Let's do it. Let's do like 10:30. Is that good?
It's good.
Tuesday, 10:30. Everyone, Karen, Christina, give me a thumbs
Yeah,
up.
where are we meeting?
Exactly.
You're funny.
Yeah, exit 6, Starbucks is open, just as an FYI. We could just drive through and get together.
I'd kill for a coffee. All right, so if PGC meets Tuesday morning, are board members available on Thursday the 30th?
I am.
Anybody that doesn't work for? All right, so what we will do is schedule a special meeting for that night. Hopefully this is the only item, and we can focus on it. We'll stick with 7 o'clock as the launch time for that. Just looking forward on our agenda, as I always like to do when we're at this moment in our meeting. We have scheduled right now for May 7th, we were calling it board self-evaluation, board goal, superintendent evaluation. I think those are going to be some items we push forward. I think superintendent evaluation, we'll have to schedule a board executive meeting at some point. And we can talk about when we want to do that. And then the next business meeting we could repurpose that meeting, obviously, for a special meeting and an update with Tony. And then our next business meeting is on the 21st. We will look forward on the agenda and see what we absolutely need to cover. We will take up a financial and staffing report and any budget transfers in the upcoming meeting. That would have normally been on the table for tonight, but we had some coverage issues, and we will get to that at our next available meeting. So we'll just look in and see what needs to be covered.
Oh, sorry.
Anyway, hearing no other agenda items anybody wants to talk about, Mr. Kelly, did you have a motion you wanted to make?
Absolutely. I'll make that motion to adjourn.
All right, and I'll pretend to second that. And all those in favor, Bernstein, yes. Stowe?
Yes.
Hirsch?
Yes.
Downey?
Yes.
Kelly?
Yes.
Kowalski?
Yes.
Olson?
Yes.
Scher?
Yes.
All right, fine. We're adjourned. We'll do it again soon. Thanks, everybody.
Good night.
Hi, guys.
Bye.
Thank
Good night,
you.
guys. Thank you.
Hi, Zedie.